because it is impossible to make something that everyone enjoys. I hate World of Warcraft. You're just scamming people. This build has a mage blood. You'll never be able to league start it, blah, blah, blah. It's like that for league starter builds, I keep what I play separate from what I suggest for people to play. But even if I didn't have a problem with that, I would have a problem with this website. I do think that should have never happened. I would love to be able to just talk to Chris Wilson. I wouldn't want to waste his time over something as trivial as the thing I was joking about.
Should I stop you from yourself? Was that a plea to stop you, or
that is are you okay with a topic hard shifting?
Wow, you managed to insult me and other people at the same time.
No, please no. Stop.
Welcome back to Tell Us About. We are on episode number 14, and we are joined today with Ten. Now, Ten takes an analytical approach to gaming, and he likes to play a wide variety of games, not just Path of Exile, which some of you may know him from. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So we always start with the question of, how did you get into gaming? And what do you like about gaming?
I first got into gaming on, it was an old laptop that ran, I think, Windows 95. And there's this disc that came with it of free games. And most of them were terrible, but there were two games that stood out to me. One was Ski Free, and I could never avoid that damn Yeti. The other one was Castle of Winds, which if you played the early Ultima games, it was very similar, kind of Dungeon and Dragon inspired. You go through, you're an adventurer. And it wasn't that forgiving. You could step on a trap, get teleported 3 levels down and killed by a green dragon, and the game just said, you know, you shouldn't have stepped on that trap, get better perception. So that is how I got my start with gaming. From there, I went on to games like Caesar 3, Civilization 2, not too much in the action genre early on, although at the time it was, you know, the late 90s, early 2000s, there weren't all that many action games. I think the only one that comes to mind from roughly that era was Doom. And I mean, everyone played Doom at least once. The game that stood out to me the most, though, I played a few years later, and that was called Ultima Online. It was the first multiplayer PvP game that I played, and I don't think I would have been playing any of the later MMOs if I hadn't experienced that. The other most important game, I know I've probably said this a couple times now, just, oh, this game's important. And then I think, wait, but there's another important game that I almost forgot was this important because I take it for granted. That's Age of Empires 2. That is one of the best strategy games ever made. And it was also one of the best competitive games ever made. So that's how I got into gaming.
So of the genres, the MMOs, the ARPGs, the RTS, what's your favorite genre?
If you ask me today, I'm going to give you a different answer from tomorrow.
Okay, answer them both.
So today, my answer is RPGs. Role-playing games that put me into another world. And what I specifically value is the sense of world building and the sense of immersion. I can't answer them both because I don't know what I'll be feeling tomorrow.
Oh, you don't? I thought I brought you on here to predict the future. So we were gonna, ask you about stocks, Bitcoin. What should we invest into? Is where I was gonna take this. So shucks. I guess we're not going there.
I hate to disappoint you. I lost my prescience because I tried to predict nerfs for 3.17 and there were none.
Well, we could talk about that. There were lots of nerfs, just not to the characters.
But I couldn't predict that.
Yeah, well, none of us could, right? Okay. I didn't ask you this, and we're going to get into trouble. We're 3 minutes in, we're going to get into trouble. It kind of pissed me off that GGG made a statement like that. There's no nerfs, guys. There's no nerfs. And then they're like, but they kind of nerfed everything with the arch and the other stuff. The amulets, too. Because you couldn't play everything from the previous league, because almost all the build guides were using the amulets that were super cheap. What are your thoughts on that?
All right, let's break this down and start with the unpopular opinion first.
Okay.
The archnemesis change needed to happen because players were too strong. And if recombinators stay as they are now, we're going to see a similar buff in 3.19. It's why I was against Harvest being re-added in 3.13, and it's why I've been against a lot of mechanics that give players free power. I often like to look at long-term game design and balance in Path of Exile from my Chris Wilson chair, which clearly, because I didn't predict the nerf in 3.17, is maybe not as well used as I hoped. But I always look at it not as 3.17 to 3.18. I look at it from 3.0 to 4.0. And if we're getting to what are the stated goals for 4.0, as far as I know them, what needs to happen? We need to slow the game down at low levels. We need to do this. We need to do that. We need to streamline processes. So as I'm looking at those things, I also look at player power and the understanding that POE is balanced on a knife's edge. On one side, you have players find the game too easy and they progress too fast and they get bored and quit. On the other side, you have players find the game too difficult and too punishing and they get frustrated and quit. Path of Exile, like many action RPGs, sells the illusion that you are a nobody who washes up on a beach, you are nearly powerless, and then you triumph over that. You kill gods, you kill eldritch horrors, and you are now the thing that everything in the map should be scared of. To sell that power fantasy, the player's power must increase exponentially. But to sell that fantasy, they can never get too strong too consistently. As a result of this, you don't see balance in the traditional sense. You don't see balance like, okay, we need the witch to be equally as powerful as the shadow. What you see is spike up, down, up, down. Player power and monster power are always going to be correlated. So if a broken mechanic is left in Path of Exile, it must either A, be so rare that it cannot be considered a factor, i.e. Mage Blood, or the monsters must be made stronger to compensate for its existence, so it becomes the new baseline.
Yeah, that is I do not envy GGG in their complexity and trying to balance those two things of what you're saying.
Yeah, and people are relatively unforgiving when they get it wrong by a little bit, such as in 3.15. I really don't think 3.15 was a complete unmitigated disaster. The launch of Wolcen was a complete unmitigated disaster. Like 3.15 was an unpopular league. A lot of the core changes were not as fleshed out as they should have been. But I don't think it's killed the success of the game. And yet, a lot of players look at that and go, well, that was the moment PoE got bad. Even though if you look at player power 3.14 versus 3.18, we are stronger at endgame in 3.18 than we were at 3.14, even with the changes to archnemesis and even with archnemesis monsters.
It depends how far people get, but yeah, probably if you actually play to the certain extent and don't quit at yellow maps, then that's true. It's also a matter of who are you balancing around? Who should you balance around?
Yeah, and the answer there is your core audience. This is going to be probably a pretty unpopular opinion that applies to both content creation and
give me
game
them.
design.
Give me those unpopular opinions. That what we're here for. I can't, let them know in the comments section how much you disagree and are up in arms, guys. Like that's be respectful, but angry.
Your job after a point is to decide who enjoys this, because it is impossible to make something that everyone enjoys. That there's going to come a point where viewer A, their enjoyment hinges on something that viewer B innately dislikes or player B innately dislikes. And ultimately, you will have to choose, does player A have fun or does player B have fun? Because when you make a middle ground there, A and B are both mad at you.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. And so GGG has picked a core audience. They've mentioned numbers before. I'm not going to mention them here because people like to quote statistics out of context. They've picked a core audience and they try to make Path of Exile the most fun experience possible for that core audience. If you fall outside of it to either extreme, you're probably not going to have fun consistently with Path of Exile. As GGG changes their design philosophy and experiments with things, some leagues will appeal more to some people than others. Scourge, for example, appealed more to people who wanted to go fast. If you didn't like going fast, it probably wasn't a great experience for you. But 317, you didn't have to go fast. 318, you don't really have to go that fast for it. And so they have the luxury of breaking it down into 3-month segments and saying, this is for you. Next time, it's still for you, but maybe not quite as much.
Do you think they've hit the mark on what they think that their target audience is, or do you think they missed the mark? Because there's the two separate debates, like you said, like who are they actually targeting, and then when they designed it, did they actually hit the group that they intended?
I think that's a very hard question for me to answer because I don't have access to internal information. And most of the information that would show if they did or did not hit those targets, completely hidden to the player. I suspect that they have, by the fact that they haven't changed certain things drastically. But I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, that's what I wonder too. And like some of their goals. So, I mean, one league squishing. Okay, let me rewind a little bit here. The thing that bothers me is when they repeat certain mistakes that they then will patch later. And they've already made them 3 times in the past and acknowledged it all 3 times, and then they still do it. That's what, anytime there's a pattern like that, that's what makes me very nervous about it. And I'm a little bit nervous right now because kind of 3 leagues in a row, retention is kind of fallen off a cliff now for the leagues.
But would you say they've made the same mistake in each case?
In these leagues, maybe changing too rapidly, or some of their messaging, I think, has been like inconsistent in the exact same way. And then there's other repeat mistakes that are kind of obvious, like Splinter dropping or like Metamorph dropping, like where you had to pick them up, right? And then also put them in. You know what I mean? Pick the inventory space seems to be a thing. Like the Sentinels, I think, I don't want to talk too much just about a specific league because obviously it's going to go obsolete. They might change and all that stuff. But the locker and the size of a 4x4 square for the Sentinels and how much they dropped, I think all that was a repeated mistake. I think the archnemesis, the separate thing, inventory space, and the amount of space we got for that was also the same mistake. And I think like that would be an example that I would give. I'm just curious if you agree or disagree on that.
So playing through during archnemesis, I certainly felt the space was an issue. In Sentinel, maybe it's just me, but I haven't really felt like it was that problematic. I don't like the locker as opposed to a stash tab for how Sentinel functions and for searchability of having it in my stash. I had no problem with it, say, for the heist locker. I had no problem with it for the expedition locker. I would have really preferred something easier to integrate into pulling out mapping supplies for Sentinel, to the point where my solution would be you can now apply a Sentinel affinity to any tab that you want. And that even if during the league they give you a locker, and then you could also apply the affinity to any tab that you wanted. Now, maybe there's a billion things like heist contracts, and you don't want to store those in tabs. You can set the affinity to the locker. Maybe you want to be able to just type in and search right next to your maps for, an Essence Sentinel. You don't have to put those in manually. They can just automatically go to that tab and you store your maps on the right side. It's a quad tab, works perfectly. I wouldn't say that that's a repeat of the same mistake, just because, again, from my experience, it wasn't the space of archnemesis that was the problem. It was the recipes and combining them and needing to keep a bunch of them. Whereas with Sentinel, I've never really felt a desire to keep all that many of them. I can say, oh yeah, I'll just combine all these because my tab's full. Cool. And if I get something good, awesome. If I get nothing good, not really an issue.
Yeah, so for they're a little bit different problems. So for the Sentinel, I think it's kind of fine to have the locker or that you could dump them in certain places. I don't like the amount of inventory space that it takes up when you're looting in the map. I think that's too much for that one. And maybe how much they drop and how bad most of them are. Like, you know what I mean? That
Yeah.
like you'll drop like 10 of them, and 1 out of 10 would be maybe useful if you had to.
So
Unless they wanted you to recombine hundreds and hundreds of them. Maybe
I
that
think
was
they
their
did
plan.
based on how many power cores I get.
Okay.
I think they did want you to recombine fairly frequently. My problem isn't the number of it drop, and it isn't the quality of it drop. It's that they don't drop identified. They're already unmodifiable. There is no reason for them to not drop identified, so I could filter them and say, all right, these are the ones I want. These are the mods I'm looking for. I want this prefix, this suffix. Those show up. I'm going to hide all the rest. If you could filter them because they dropped identified, I would have no issue with the other aspects of number, quantity, even size, because then I know, yeah, it's a 4x4, but I'm picking up something that I want.
I'd be okay with that as well. But the thing, yeah, it's like any problem. There's multiple ways to solve it. But I guess my whole point is it shipped with a sim with that problem. That's kind of, it's not exactly the same. And like you said, there were different reasons that it happened in the archnemesis. But it's an overall space to inventory to feel thing where they're kind of making the same mistake. And I think that they need to think more about, like, okay, how is that going to play out? Now, the real question is, I don't know what their mark is. Maybe they're completely happy with how it's going, but I sure am not.
Yeah, and I do think there were mistakes in terms of archnemesis. Now, I don't know if I'm correct in this theory, but my guess is their goal was to replace rare monster mods from day one of archnemesis. And they didn't really focus on making the league mechanic good in terms of a thing that you do in maps. They wanted to make that acceptable enough that it could get testing, and then really good in terms of how the actual monster modifiers interacted with the base types and with the players. For Sentinel, I don't yet know what their idea is. I don't think it's just going to go core in 3.19 without any changes. I think it needs reworks. But I don't know if the idea was to test a mechanical system or to test a thing that will replace another aspect of the game. I believe that I haven't gotten to this point because you caught me. I have been watching Josh Strife Hayes' interview with Chris Wilson.
I haven't watched
And
it yet.
yeah, I'm about halfway through. I have heard that later on, and I'm sorry if anyone sees this interview before they have seen that, there's a little bit of a spoiler. They're taking the mechanics from both Sentinel and Scourge, and I think possibly Ultimatum, reworking them in a different form and putting them back into the game in the near future. Kind of like how they did with the Forsaken Masters.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so I'm not going to judge Sentinel too harshly, nor Scourge for that matter, until I see what their big plan was. Because yes, Leagues and Path of Exile exist. As a refreshed form of content, it is the full game. It's also something that won't have to matter in 3 months. That they can just throw it out if they need to. They can test things and they can go crazy. And I think that's valuable. I wish more games would do that. When I played World of Warcraft, everything they did had to be set in stone. And Blizzard was always very inflexible in terms of changing design choices. I wish they could say, for this raid tier, we're going to do something wacky and off the wall. It might suck. You might hate it. But sometimes you find things that are absolutely amazing, that add to gameplay and add to the core of what an action RPG is and redefine a genre. I don't think that GGG, if they hadn't have experimented with a weird and wacky currency system, would have nearly as much success as they do today.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with that, and I definitely like that they're experimenting with all these leagues. It's the amount of polish sometimes especially when they have to patch 3 to 10 times in the like first 2 months. That makes me scared, right? Because a lot of people take off, like the really hardcore players, because of the new economy, they take off work, they go in to do it, and they never are going to experience any of the changes that they make 2-3 weeks or whatever. So I don't think, like, I think GGG is okay with that. I don't think they should be okay with that.
I see it a little differently because, and maybe this is me being old school, but I almost see leagues as a public beta where, yeah, things are going to go wrong in the first month. And if you hate that, play standard, because by the time the content hits standard, with one exception, it's really well polished and the issues are sorted out. The one exception in recent history being Harvest, where they fixed nothing.
Yeah, but they might throw it out, so you might never get to experience it else the caveat, right? That's the problem.
Yeah.
Is you do, and then you feel like you missed out. So that's the whole thing. Yeah, I think I think that is how they look at it. And I would say they should treat it like an alpha. Not, you know what I mean? Like a little bit more polish or a little bit less patches or something. They shouldn't have like catastrophic things that they haven't thought of in the first 1 to 2 weeks. Like that should already be in the core, and then they can patch it after that to do their little tweaks. That would be my
And I also think there's a lot of non-catastrophic things, just based on things that Chris Wilson has said on Bayclast and elsewhere, that they know it's a thing. They knew a lot of players would have a bad reaction to initial archnemesis. And they said, yeah, but overall, our testing team had fun and enjoyed the changes. So we're going to see. We think it's too much, but we're going to see how players react, because people could find that they love it. And if so, we've learned something valuable from that. If we never give players the chance, if we just assume, well, no, this is too much, maybe we should be making Path of Exile harder. I mean, we have people telling us Path of Exile is too hard, make it easier. We have people telling us Path of Exile is too easy, make it harder. We don't know who we should actually listen to there, because you can't really, and this applies to content creation too. You can't really listen
all this
to,
stuff is, we're about to pivot into that and draw all the parallels. Don't you worry.
Yeah.
You're getting a little...
You cannot listen to the things that people say and take it just at face value. Because so many times I've looked at a comment that says, you should really do this, or I wish you'd do this. And I look at it, and when I was newer at YouTube, I did it. And then the next video would do so much worse. And I realized, well, they're expressing it this way. Okay, this is going to sound bad, but it goes back to the now very memed on quote from Blizzard of, you think you want this, but you don't. And the reality is, you want the thing or feeling that something elicits, and you are drawing the connection to the way that you're expressing it incorrectly, because you don't understand the medium. That I'm sure in some of my examples, I've said the wrong thing or drawn the wrong conclusion, because I'm not a game designer. I don't work for grinding your games. And I'm guessing at their intent with my own experience as a content creator. Just like how someone who comments on one of my videos will draw the wrong conclusions because they might just assume that, oh, perfect example. Some of my videos, people have said, you should add music. You should add music to your streams. They don't understand the copyright minefield that is adding music to your streams. They just see it as, yeah, some background noise can be nice when not much else is going on.
And then if you added it, then you'd have someone say, you know, I couldn't hear you, so you really should just not have music. So there's always...
Of course. And that goes back to what I said earlier, that you have to pick who to please, because after a point, you can't please anyone. And I can't, or, well, you can please someone, but you can't please everyone. And if you try to please everyone, you won't please anyone.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how much harder it is for GGG, because even at my channel size, I've already reached that point where I'm consciously making a decision knowing this is going to make someone unhappy, but it's going to make more people happy than that one person is unhappy.
Well, you need to reach, you know, peak Wilson, maybe sit in that chair and just say, you know, this is probably going to piss everyone off, and we'll just see what happens. Then we won't do that again.
Yeah, and I think it's fine. the reason I have a lot of trust in GGG is if I look at 1 league, 2 leagues, or even 3 leagues, I can be going, I'm not so sure about this. I have some weird feelings. But then I look at 5 or 6 leagues and I go, oh, that actually worked really well. They actually turned everything around. I see why they did that now. I can't think of any time where I've been dissatisfied with what GGG does over a scale of years. I can think of times where I've been dissatisfied over a scale of months, but it always comes back around to something that puts the game in a better state than it was a year ago or than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah. I would agree with that as well. I just wish it wouldn't be as bumpy of a ride. So, for instance, when they did the whole squish and there's more defenses, and then they kind of introduced all those new flask things, and they didn't have the bench, or they didn't have the other immunities that they then put on later. They did rectify that with 1 or 2, but I kind of feel like they should have seen that coming a little bit. Maybe I'm being really uncharitable because maybe some of them don't play the game as much as I did, but maybe I have a bias. It's really hard to say, like, what is reasonable for them to expect. But a lot of the things, if you had asked me, these are the things that I'm doing, what is going to be the reaction, I could have told you exactly what they ended up making the change later. So the fact that they do that a lot of times and still don't know what the answer is scares me then.
I'm not sure it's that they don't know. And again, it goes back to filtering. Because people have said for a long time that an auction house would be the best thing for Path of Exile. And those people have not played free-to-play games with auction houses and had to deal with bots. Those people have not manipulated markets in World of Warcraft. I have. In my WoW days, I ended up controlling Dark Moon decks on my server because I found out who was selling herbs. There's a good chance some of them were botters, but I didn't ask that. I just said, hey, you have herbs for sale. I will buy all of them at about 2 gold above market price. But you have to sell only to me. I'll buy any number you have to sell to me. At the time I had about 200,000 gold. And then I made Darkmoon cards. This was before they added cooldowns to time gate them. You could make as many as you wanted. I had around 90% of my entire server's market. Then I completed my sets by buying the remaining cards. I would also buy the cheap cards out of a set, which meant you couldn't complete a full set off of the auction house. And then I sold the decks. It was costing me 30...
Wow, full scumbag revealed here, exclusive.
Absolutely. 40,000 gold was my cost for these decks that I was selling for 80 to 200,000. Here's the knock-on effects of that, though. I only cared about herbs for Darkmoon cards. Herbs are also used for potions. Herbs are also used for flasks. That's 3 people, or 3 groups of people, who are now affected negatively because potions went up and I started selling them. Flasks went up and I started selling them because I had all the herbs. I was controlling the supply. That will inevitably happen in Path of Exile, except it's probably not going to be a player who had enough money and was in a limited enough population to do this. It's going to be a botnet. And that botnet is going to buy the item before it even pings on your trade site. That botnet is going to, have 4,000 accounts just grinding away at things to add massive amounts of currency that it can use to further manipulate the system. That botnet can buy and sell items within its own accounts. And this is what plagues most free-to-play games. It is why most free-to-play games struggled with their economies. It's why RuneScape banned all player-to-player trading for years, and that nearly killed RuneScape because they're trying to fight bots and they're trying to fight gold farmers. What was the end result of that? Well, there's the Grand Exchange. What could you do on the Grand Exchange? Put buy orders and sell orders for items. RuneScape, like Path of Exile, has a lot of items that players don't use on a daily basis. Maybe you only really need it for a quest, or maybe it's just a rare and expensive item. So what ends up happening is people would buy those items, put bunches of buy orders in. The price would go from 100 gold to 1,000 to 10,000 to 100,000. but no one actually ever wants that item worth 100,000 gold. This was what was called junk trading. You would have those things worth a lot that were usually difficult to obtain, because if anyone could go farm it, well, then it doesn't work. And you'd use it as leverage in a high value item trade, where the item is actually worth 10 times what the Grand Exchange says. So you're including a bunch of items that are worth maybe 1/100th of what the Grand Exchange says. And it balances out, and you get the amount of gold that you feel you deserve for your item. I think the best analogy I can think of is a lot of people who want an auction house in PoE also do not like the level of control that the Forbidden Trove has over mirror services. Personally, I don't really care. It doesn't really affect me. I don't make mirror items very often. I've made one ever. But the amount of control that TFT has on mirror services is nothing compared to what they would have over items in an auction house economy. And that control is nothing compared to what bots would have in an auction house economy.
What if they only did small, tradable, craftable, currencies, invitations, and mapping supplies? Would we still run into the same problem, do you think?
I think due to botting, yes, because a bot could decide, well, there's only 4,000 Feards. I'm going to triple the price of a Feards for some nefarious reason that I'm sure everyone watching can guess.
But you could then go farm it, though, as a strategy, so who cares, no?
You can, but your profit off of doing that is going to be relatively low compared to their profit off of manipulating it because of scale. For something like a Feared invitation, you can only generate so many per hour. Now, for something like a transmute, then it seems relatively harmless, but at that point, you might as well remove a transmute from the game because now it has no actual value. It just becomes an inconvenience to pick up because there's so many of them that the price, you'd probably see transmutes go to 1,000 to chaos if there was an auction house that just had small crafting currencies.
So what do you think the solution is to trading? Because a couple of these things already happened. There's already price fixing and manipulation for like PoE Ninja stuff. And it's kind of a nightmare, especially like I would say first 4 days of the league, when they get the massive volume of players, the trade site is going down all the time to the point where you can't trade, or it's so delayed where you cannot trade.
So I don't know how to solve the massive volume of players part. I've heard different people say different things. I've heard that GGG should just get more servers. I think if it was that simple, they would have already done it.
Yeah,
I've also heard that they have to remove all trade macros, which, if that's true, I can see why they haven't done it. Because I'm sure they've weighed, do we make people really mad by removing trade macros that first week, removing the allowance of them, and then limiting searches extremely? Or do we just put up with trade being slow? I'm not a web dev. I don't understand any of the behind the scenes stuff. If I had a magic wand, I'd just make more capacity. But I can't give a nuanced opinion on that. In terms of price manipulation and stuff, it does happen. But it's incredibly difficult to do in Path of Exile as compared to any other system. Price fixing of things like items that are well below the norm, I really don't have much of an issue with that in my own trading, that whenever I come across an account like that, I ignore list it. And after a week or so of a league, I just don't see them anymore. I'll see maybe one after that. I can see how that's a problem for people. I can see how that's a problem when it hits PoE Ninja. And the best thing I can say there right now is do your due diligence. Don't just look at the lowest price. Actually look at the page. Don't just look at PoE Ninja. Actually look at the page. So how do you solve that long term, and how do you make that less of an issue? Because there's always the argument of, well, it could just be a bot account, and it probably is. You could force to sell, but then the new player who got a headhunter and accidentally put it up for 40 chaos is out of luck. They just sold their headhunter for 40 chaos because they're forced to. This is why GGG does not auto force you to sell things at the price. It is a worse experience for an average player to be forced to sell something for too low than for the people who fall for or complain about price fixing. I think a confidence interval search would be very helpful. That you could say on the trade site, all right, this is the 95% confidence interval for this item, and something like let's just say it's a 16 Chaos Headhunter. That would have a warning, low confidence, be warned. I don't think you can prevent the listings from showing up, but you can give players additional information. Just like how if you want to combat scamming, I think RuneScape's solution is actually brilliant. In RuneScape, a lot of people scammed because items looked similar or items had the same name. So what they did is they made a trade window and then a second trade window. So your trade window has all the items visually, just like POEs. Then you go to the second one where it's all text and it lists all the numbers. So this would immediately kill a lot of the scams around div cards and price swaps, around div cards and one with similar art. The second part that they added on was in little parentheses, things like if you had blue mystic gloves and yellow mystic gloves, it would say light mystic or blue mystic. And then you would know what the thing is with details. I could see that for things like socket links. It would show, BBB, GGG. And that way, 6-link scammers have a much harder time because someone has to look at the first screen and the second screen and then accept. And for most scams, the way to avoid it is to just stop yourself to think for 5 seconds before you click that accept window.
None of these things help me though. And then I have to trade. I don't know. It's so annoying trying to trade items from the site, like doing the bulk exchange and then whispering 200 people.
I don't have very much issue with that personally.
Okay. On the first days, it's like really bad, or on the first 2 days.
Yeah. So
it's not so bad later in the league because it's the early volume on the days. Like I told you, I make most of my money the first couple days, so it's really annoying.
Yeah. I make most of mine a little later in, and I'll just go, oh, this guy has 10 exalts worth for sale. All right, I'm buying from him. And I message one person. I remember when I bought the fossils for the video, I forget how many I bought, but it was one single trade. I just found someone with really high bulk. I bought from them.
Yeah, you overpaid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or TFT.
Right. And that's what I was going to say, that the other thing you could maybe do is early league, look at the bulk channels in TFT.
Yeah.
I know someone who actually did that this league, that early on they couldn't get essences. So there's a channel in TFT called Bulk Want to Buy Entire Tabs. They started posting in that. They only needed 3 different essences. They bought people's entire essence tabs and they were flipping the rest for a profit while sitting in their hideout crafting for the 3 that they wanted. And they made twice the money and got every essence they needed.
I think that's not awesome. A bad idea. It's not a bad idea.
Yeah. So
because everyone's going to have the shortage of them anyways, so you just put them together and flipping them all.
Yeah. And it also, I think, is beneficial that now someone like me who doesn't want to be bothered with that can go, oh, you have 10 exalts worth. There you go. I can do my crafting project.
Yeah.
I like the innovation that comes out of systems with friction. I don't think the Path of Exile trade system is perfect, but I have played RuneScape, Ultima Online. I played Arcade. I played World of Warcraft for years. I played Guild Wars 2. I played a little Elder Scrolls Online. I played New World. I've played Lost Ark. I've played... I don't even remember all the MMOs I've played at this point. Out of all of those, Path of Exile is head and shoulders the best economy above any of them. None come close. There's some stagnation. There are some problems. There are less problems than I've experienced in any other situation. The next best would be RuneScape, interestingly. But I say that with a very different perspective from what a lot of modern players would have today, because I played RuneScape mostly about 15 years ago.
Gotcha. I mean, of the games I played, maybe I didn't play them at the level where it just affected me, because most of these just didn't. But I feel it in POE with the way that I play the game. And I didn't in any of the other games that I played.
For a lot of the MMOs, especially the ones where things like that affected me, I it didn't affect me because I was the one affecting others. That in RuneScape, when I played, my account was nearly maxed and I had around 1 billion gold. In World of Warcraft, I was in a top 30-ish US guild and I was controlling markets on my server. My main competition was a guy in my guild, and we were just like, yeah, we just don't compete with each other. It's like, okay. Everyone else.
That's convenient.
Yeah. Because we were the top guild on the server. Or before that, on my previous server where I also controlled markets, I messaged an officer from the top guild and I was like, hey, I can supply you with this stuff. And so they didn't compete with me because they got what they wanted at market rate, and I charged everyone else more to compensate for that.
There's a lot of parallels between how the economy works in all these games and the real world.
Absolutely.
But a lot of people don't realize that.
Oh yeah,
it very much is like that. Yeah. Someone gets a competitive advantage and then just screws everyone. Basically. Yep. Just like in the real world. Just like in the real world.
Except that's a lot harder to do in Path of Exile. Because there's the trade friction.
Yeah, I think so too.
And
that's in the real world, yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I like Path of Exile's trade system. I definitely see improvements that could be made. I've mentioned a couple here. I'm sure if I had more time to think, I could come up with some more. But I look at it through the perspective of this is Path of Exile's trade system as compared to every other game I've played. I feel like a lot of people who want an auction house played a game very casually. Because when I played Black Desert Online, I played it pretty casually. And there were a lot of viciously pay-to-win systems. And there were a lot of really bad things with the economy in that game. And in the 100 or so hours I played it, they didn't really affect me. I was immune to or blind to the problems because I was just playing it casually. I'd play for maybe 10 hours a week. And I did that for a couple months. I haven't played it since.
I'm selfish. Still want an auction house. You haven't sold me. Not for big items. I really don't want to I don't want to interact with any other players ever.
Something tells me though that even if there was an auction house, you'd be one of the people who explicitly benefits, and that the average player would be explicitly hurt by it.
Perfect. Sounds good to me. Where do I sign up? It's all about me after all. Yeah. Oh, I hate whispering to people. Possibly. Or I'd be really irritated. But then I'd be like, well, at least I don't have to whisper 400 people. I just have to pay 20 times as much for the item. And then I'll probably complain about that. Let's be real here.
Until something gets bought out hard. And then you realize, oh, wait, I can't buy this right now.
Yeah. That kind of happens, though, in the game.
It kind of does. But with an auction house, it's so much easier. It's just a few clicks.
Yeah, exactly. You don't even have to whisper them or whatever, but yeah.
Right. Whereas with whispering, that's where the system actually works in your favor, because someone tried to buy everything out. They whispered, let's just say the first 50 people selling it, but 12 of them were AFK. And you catch one of those AFK people right as he sits down. And what he sees is your message and goes, oh, a big trade, yes! And sells to you. And you just got a thing. And the person trying to buy it out didn't. Because you were the last person to message him at just the right time.
Mm-hmm. But the problem with that is people have bots and stuff set up, which aren't, you know what I mean? I'd be okay with that if it was competing with real people, not people who see the listing before you even get a chance, already whispered and took them off the market.
Right. But again, that's where the friction comes in of the person didn't see their message because they went AFK. They see yours because you are the most recent, because the bot probably doesn't spam.
Yeah.
Or if it does, it has, like sleep 60. It messages once a minute.
Now I understand what you mean. I should have had you clarify what you meant by friction there. I mean, to a certain extent, I meant, but I didn't look at it that way, at least. So, light bulb moment.
Yeah. So, the more you go into the POE rabbit hole, and I think this is probably true for any game that's been out for nearly 10 years. The more you realize that if you try to change one thing, it will have effects in this giant spider web that expand outwards. And sometimes those things have to be changed, consequences be damned. But other times, until you find a really good solution, it's better to do nothing at all. I remember a very interesting, I forget if it was a developer interview or a blog post from World of Warcraft about why they have all these different bag sizes, but they never change the default one. And it's because in their early game code, there were things that were based off of the default inventory size that would fundamentally break World of Warcraft. And so it made more sense that if they want you to have more space, your default bag is 16 slot, and they'll just give you a 32. It might have been to a player that, oh, well, why can't you just make it 30? And then all the other bags are 30 and it matches. No. It is 32 to make up for the fact that your default will not be able to change. You're getting the same total space you would, but it's so much harder to do that. And it's easy to just make a bigger bag.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, that's what I deal with when I do coding stuff. So I definitely empathize GGG on a lot of these things. It might not technically be possible, or it is technically possible, but it would require you to rework 200 other systems, and it's never going to happen, type thing.
Yeah.
You get into those situations, and the end user's like, but I want this result, and I just want to do it this way. And you're like, okay, what? It's important to zoom out and say, okay, what are you actually mad about? Okay, you're mad about that. All right, we're going to do this entirely different thing, but it's going to solve your problem. So
yeah,
it is important to do that as well. And the parallel also there is in content creation as well. When people are upset and stuff, like you said, maybe not take their suggestion, but maybe, because maybe that's not the best way to solve said problem. Maybe that hurts you in other ways or causes you too much grief to do that. But maybe you can get the same result in a different way and they would still be happy with it.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to make the hard decisions. I feel like when it comes to trade going down from the number of API calls, that's probably one where it's a hard decision either way. And I don't think there's an easy solution just because it hasn't been solved yet. With big issues in PoE, if there's an easy solution, it gets solved. And to bring that back to content creation, when I started talking about my Patreon, people got mad at it. But I didn't change anything about how I talked about my Patreon because I needed to talk about it. And that is something that either you can be understanding and realize that I don't get millions of dollars per video. So additional support from Patreon lets me do more things that maybe you will enjoy because it's not the most SEO optimized. It's not this is the 100 million DPS one exalt build. But at the same time, that also means I'm going to be talking about Patreon and that I just have to completely ignore anyone who's like, you shouldn't be talking about this. You're too small as a YouTuber. I'm just going to ignore that because I need to talk about it. And is it an easy decision or one I make lightly? No, I'm still going to make it because the alternative is every video becomes 100 million DPS, one exalt build.
Yeah. I mean, I have the similar thing going on with these interviews where I do the highlight and I put it on there, and then I've lost probably 2 to 3 subs on every single one of those. It's like, okay, if you can't understand that once a week I'm going to post an interview highlight and you don't have to watch it, I'm still going to do all my other content. Sorry, bro.
Yeah.
like I don't know what you want from me. This other thing I care about, doing these interviews, it's important to me. I like doing it. I'm going to plug it. Some people are interested. I don't know.
Yeah. And that's just, again, eventually you have to choose, is it worth making this person happy? Every company makes that decision.
Yeah.
Some of them handle it better and some of it handle terribly. I mean, look at Blizzard. They have handled making their customers happy terribly and just pretty much coasted on size and the fact that some aspects of their content is deeply appealing, that some aspects are psychologically addictive. There are people who hate World of Warcraft, and if you talk to them for 5 minutes, the first 5 words out of their mouth are, I hate World of Warcraft. But they play it every single day because they're like, yeah, but I have to log in for dailies. I can't miss that. That's progress. And I'm very glad that I see a wider perspective than just one game. I would be very concerned as a content creator if my perspective is Path of Exile is the only game I've ever played and the only game I will ever play.
I play a couple different games, but I mostly play Path of Exile nowadays. But I mean, I've been gaming for a very, very long time, so I've played tons and tons and tons of games. But...
yeah, and there's phases where I primarily played Path of Exile and not much else. Primarily played World of Warcraft, primarily played RuneScape, so many other titles. But I've still had those hours of experience and I've experienced other games. I still regularly play a lot of different games. Like I went back and I played Dishonored because I remembered it being really good, just spectacular experience. The parkour, no issues with handholds or anything like I was used to in so many other games. Combat.
I have no idea what Dishonored is. Can you give context to people who've never
stealth,
heard of it?
Sure. Stealth action role-playing game.
Okay.
If you can think of Assassin's Creed, that except with magic. And very open world level design, although not quite. One of the things Dishonored does well is it uses open level design to give you choices, but then gives consequences to your choices to restrict the paths. So you could go straight through. There's a bunch of guards. You can kill them all. Or you could sneak around and go up on a rooftop and you might find a side quest over there, but you have to deal with this other problem because of that. That side quest might actually get you to do more work. Maybe you have to go help an old lady who happens to be something else. I really liked the way the game presented itself. So I went back to see, well, is it as good as I remembered? Or am I looking back with nostalgia? Because there's some games that people say are amazing. Torchlight 2, Rogue Legacy, Darkest Dungeon, Bloodstained Ritual of a Night. Those are all games with impeccable reputations. And for different reasons, I did not like any of them. And I wondered, is it just that it appeals to someone for different reasons than what I play games for? Or is it because the person played it at a certain time in their life when it appealed to them, even if some of the choices are objectively bad? Because I've had games with objectively bad design choices, and I still really liked the game. And so I'm looking back at some of those. And I started with Dishonored to say, was it as good as I thought for the reasons that I thought? Do I still feel the same way? The answer in that one, yes. I was surprised that it was shorter than I expected. It was only about 6 hours to play through the whole thing. I could have sworn it would take 10 plus.
Yeah, because back in the day, you didn't know anything about video
Yeah.
games or what. It's funny how some of those things are.
And
it was so much time when you were little, right? Like,
yeah.
Oh my God, that took me 2 months or something.
Yeah.
Did you ever have limited time to play games? Did your parents ever only allow you to play a certain amount of hours?
Kind of, yeah. And it made Civilization hard because Civ games go long.
Gotcha.
And it's like, oh, but I really want to do this. And I did so many science victories just because that was what I could fit into the time frame. Because I mean, you could go for the I want to do world conquest. I want to nuke people. I want to be Gandhi. But that's a Civ joke that Gandhi used nukes aggressively in the first Civ game.
Okay.
So I couldn't do that.
I never played Civ, so went right over.
Yeah. I couldn't do that on a time limit, though. It took too long to crush all the cities. So instead, I went for the science victory because I could achieve that in the time frame.
Yeah, a lot of console games that I played when I grew up, I didn't even own the game. I would go over to cousin's house or something. My aunt would watch me and my sister, and this would happen after school. So I'd get to play 1 or 2 hours after homework was done or something like that with my cousins, or we'd alternate playing. So a lot of games that I played a lot of like 1 to 2 hours over the course of a whole year. Like maybe lots and lots of hours, but never really made progress, right? never beat the game. Don't know what the story is, and we always did like the same part or whatever. A lot of I don't know that I've ever beaten Contra. We used to play Contra all the time. I know we've done the first levels a billion times. You know, well, eventually we got the whole what was it called, Game Genie and stuff. You got unlimited lives, so you couldn't screw it up. But those games are like really hard to when you're little to get through. So.
But also when you're little, you don't care. I remember on one of my first...
I would love to go back to that where I just didn't care when I was playing a game. I just had a blast, right?
Yeah. On one of the first games that I played, it was for the Game Boy Advance. And it was a Dungeons and Dragons game. And I had no clue what was going on. I got lost so many times. And I was just like, well, I'm going to go through this dungeon and it's going to be great. I'm going to find the evil eye monster at the end. I don't think I got past the third level of that game ever. And years later, I looked, it's not a long game. I must have played it for over 100 hours and never got past the second
it's
level.
Like a 3-hour game.
Yeah, it's like, I think it was more of a 10 or 15 hour game, but even so, I wasn't even halfway through.
I went back and played original Zelda on an emulator, and I'm like, I feel like I played this 1,000 hours. What the heck? You know what I mean? It like takes 2 seconds to go through the whole thing. You know what I mean? Like the levels, it's like, okay, there's 14 rooms. Like, each stage, if you know what you're doing kind of or remember it, takes the same amount as like one map and Path of Exile.
But then when you're little, you just get distracted and you backtrack.
You run around, you don't know what
you're
Yeah. Crazy.
I worry about kids these days who are their first experience of gaming is gonna be a mobile game that keeps telling you to spend money.
Oh no. And, I haven't even thought of that.
And I know they're marketing to kids 100%.
Well, all the stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. That someone out there, if you're going to be 8, 9 years old and their first game is going to ask them for money at every opportunity, they're going to think that's normal. That is terrifying.
Well, same thing with TikTok things where people consume 15 seconds of content all the time. They just swipe. What do you think of that? Like when people do parenting from age whatever and say, there you go, entertain yourself with all those things, are they going to be able to pay attention in school or learn anything at all? Oh, we're so screwed. Anyways, that's a whole other topic. We can just talk about how screwed we are. I keep bringing up social media was a mistake. It's out of the box. I think we're screwed.
I could get into such a rant about attribution theory and how people refuse to consider that they are a potential point of failure in a given equation. That they die to something and their immediate thought is, oh, the game must be stupid. Not, wait, did I do something wrong there?
Am I stupid?
No, I must be smart. I must be good at this.
Exactly.
First time I played it, but I must be amazing at it. The game is wrong.
Well, we get that all the time too. First time playing it, following a guide. Well, either the game is wrong, I'm not stupid. Yeah, the game's not wrong, I'm not stupid. The content creator's scamming me. Immediate jump to that. I don't understand something. You're trying to con your whole audience, aren't you, scammer? Like, have you had any of those?
I have a couple times. Usually in regards to the cost of a build.
Okay.
That
I had someone accuse me of speeding up the footage, which was hilarious, is the Soul Eater build. So you get more and more Soul Eater charges as you go in, so you get faster, right? It's the cheese Soul Eater thing.
That's the whole point.
That's the whole point. I got I did that build like 2 different videos on that, right? Like the budget version and the other. I got comments on both of them. Like 3 people on each of those accusing me of speeding up footage when it's just, no, that's the mechanic, dude. Did you listen to any
Yeah.
of it?
Nope. And depending on what the person has seen, I think that can be a reasonable reaction because there are some build guides out there that do that scam people.
I know that's the
and,
problem that they do. But
yeah,
I explained what was happening in the first minute.
right.
I said, "Hey, it's getting faster because we're collecting souls, and the souls I'll give this. Wow, why aren't we fast? So this makes us go really fast." That was the first 2 minutes. So had you watched any of it at all and actually listened to any of the words that came out of my mouth, you would know, oh, that's a mechanic in the game. And the whole point of it was to be like, wow, this actually looks so ridiculous, like you're cheating and you can get it on a budget, but you have to do these poor quality of life things, but this could be yours too. It's actually on a budget. But anyways.
I think my favorite in terms of that is I made a build at the end of 3.17 that was about a 400 exalt budget. I forget if it was 400 exalts that I spent or if it was 400 exalts that I spent including a mage blood. Either way, very high-end build. And I specifically said that it was a LE Spectral Helix. In the video, I say, you can play LE Spectral Helix as a league starter. Refer to this person if you want to do that. And I got so many angry comments. Well, not so many. There's a couple. I got angry comments about, you're just scamming people. This build has a mage blood. You'll never be able to league start it, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I said to league start this? I specifically said to league start this other thing. What are you talking about? Did you just look at the POB? You somehow got the word easy to league start and the POB, and you forgot the other like 10 minutes of content between those two things. And it just, or the people who comment.
Did you say that in the first 20 seconds?
I don't think so. No.
If you did it, I mean, it checks out because they watch 30 seconds and then look at the POV and don't watch any of the rest. So that actually makes quite a bit of sense to me.
Yeah.
If that's what happens. So.
But at the same time, it's so funny to me because you could just look on POE Ninja and see, well, people are doing this. That taking a content creator's word for the efficacy of their build, if you don't know anything about them, I find is generally a dicey proposition for people. So I always tell someone, verify it. Look on POE Ninja. See how many people are doing this and what level they are. If you want to play it on a low budget, see if someone's doing it in solo self-found. No one's doing it in solo self-found. Did they do it week 1, week 2 in trade? No. All right, probably can't play that on a budget. Check for yourself. If you can see, oh, well, these 200 people are having success with this. All right, at least at the level of investment you're seeing that they have, you can have success. But don't just take someone's word for it because, unfortunately, there's no rules around that. Some people lie. Most people don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things with social media in general is that what really matters is the click-through, the retention, the other stuff. What's a big part of things spreading, or isn't a part of that, is it true? And people tend to gravitate towards things that are very sound too good to be true and often are type thing.
Oh, yeah. I've seen it so many times. And that's another one that, in terms of content creation, I find really funny. People will get mad at me for using a clickbait title or thumbnail when I explain why it's not clickbait at some point in the video, but they didn't watch to that point. Mm-hmm. And they make the comment before doing that and then leave the video without understanding that, no, this is exactly what I said it was.
Well, clickbait isn't even used correctly nowadays. Because if you do something that is clickable, but you deliver on said promise, that is not clickbait. Clickbait was originally you promise something and none of the crap that you promised have anything to do with what's in the video.
Yeah,
right. That's what it's supposed to mean.
Has a great video on that, where he talks about how he was doing his titles and thumbnails and how he ended up changing them to get people to click more, because you want to leave people with a question. You want to withhold enough information that someone is curious while presenting enough information so that they know at a glance whether it will appeal to them or not.
Mhm.
If you do this correctly, a lot of people will click your video because it puts a question in the back of their head. And a lot of people will watch your video because it's enough information to know, oh yeah, you know, I care about that. And he mentioned how one of his videos, it was titled something like, "Do salt lamps work?" In the thumbnail, he has the text no. He put the premise, salt lamps don't work, because the thing being withheld there was, well, why don't they work? And he's done a really good job. It's why he's as big as he is, in part. Don't get me wrong. His content is very high quality. He
Who
does a
is
very
it?
good job with his
Who did
content.
you say this was?
Veritasium.
Okay, type that to me when we're.
Yeah. But
Or link me the one video where he talks about what he does with the thing.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to watch that.
I think he has something like 5-10 mil subscribe, some very large number. The thing is, good quality content does not, in and of itself, get you far on YouTube or anywhere else where your content is shown to people and then they voluntarily choose to engage with it or not. That if YouTube just auto-played videos, you don't get to choose what's up next. The algorithm chooses for you. I think the quality of content would be the number one factor there. That people could choose to skip a video, but they don't choose to get shown it. Instead, something that's incredibly important is the packaging. Whenever I see a big YouTuber talk about a lot of their success, they will mention the quality stuff and they'll mention, you know, research and all that. But it's the packaging that is often very important. So I pay a lot of attention to the packaging and I want it to be as clickable as possible, even if I'm not 100% truthful. I'm not deceiving for the sake of, haha, gotcha. I'm not doing a complete 180, unless, of course, it's a subversive video where that is the entire point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm deceiving just enough to give you some ideas, like a video that I released a couple days ago. July 12th. Yeah. I hit 1,000 or 10,000 ES on my Cast and Crit Forbidden Right build. It only cost me 90x. That's the title. The thumbnail is the 10,000 ES number, question mark worth, and -70 and -20 exalts next to items. I could have titled that if I was, you know, full information. I used a bunch of tailoring orbs on my chest, and I crafted myself new gloves. But that is not nearly as interesting as I spent 90x to do this. Was it worth it?
Yeah, exactly. You're too direct. And you don't want to give away the whole that would be giving away the entire what you did of the entire video. So you always want to ask, like when you're titling and stuff, is there a point to still watching the video?
Yeah. And
now the hold on, one other thing. So the interesting thing is when you're dealing with a lot of videos, you could have just summarized it in one line and people could have not watched your video. To do the look at that from a different thing.
I tend to make mine as information dense as possible so it can't be done.
Okay.
But with this one, if I had a straightforward title and thumbnail, here's what happens. People click, they watch for much less time, and then they ask me, how do you make your gloves? The how do I make my gloves will be in the video, but because it's so straightforward, they will click off almost immediately and then ask the question. This way, they don't know that I'm talking about how I made my gloves. They kind of know gloves are involved, and they can see that from the thumbnail.
Mm-hmm.
They know that I spent things to upgrade my build and that I'm getting more energy shield. But now the question is, well, how did he do that? And the answer is tailoring orbs on my chest and crafting new gloves. And then I go through exactly how I did that.
Now, the interesting thing that I always find about this, what you're saying here is 100% true, but then they'll watch it because of the thing after they get into it, but they wouldn't have clicked in anyways. But the fun part is then people aren't honest with that fact. And they say, well, you should have done it that way.
Yep.
So have you ever fallen into that trap where people have given you that feedback and then you change your thumbnails and then no one's clicking through any of the stuff?
No.
Okay.
Because whenever
I did that for a period of time.
So here's the thing. When I did that, I always thought, yeah, but I'm the YouTuber here. What would I click? And I'd look at their suggestions and go, yeah, but I wouldn't click that. Maybe that appeals to that one person, but it's my job to make the decision. And if I wouldn't click it, I'm not going to ask my audience to click it.
Do you think so? This only works if you think you're a lot like your audience. What I find is I am not. So do you think you're like your audience, or you have to think, I gotta think, how is someone who isn't me going to think about this? And then I have other people who are my audience, and then I'll like give them, hey, which one of these would you click? That's kind of how I do it. What I would have clicked is not what I do for my thumbnails, because I appreciate the I spent blah 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 on the gloves and the tailored whatever thing. That's what I would have clicked, and then I would have watched your whole video. And I'm weird. I'm very weird in that. Like, I very much appreciate direct to the point thing with full no clickbaity whatever stuff. Most people do not behave like that though.
Yeah. I think it's because I'm looking at it not what I would click as a YouTuber, or not what I click as a viewer. I am looking at it as what would I click as a YouTuber. That's changed my perspective on thumbnails, where now I'm much more likely to click a really good thumbnail that raises questions and frames things well than one that gives me the information that I'm just looking for on its face.
Okay. But I'm saying for me, looking at me as the viewer, what I prefer in content is not what I actually would recommend for both making like, I cannot make content for myself in Path of Exile.
I can't either,
and I also cannot market it the way that would appeal to myself.
Yeah, and that's the thing. As much as I make content for Path of Exile, I don't watch a lot of content for Path of Exile. And what I watch is probably very different from what my audience watches, because my audience is coming to me for information on how things work. Something like, how does this unique item work? How does this build work? But I either already know the answer to that, or I want to learn it for myself through experimentation. I don't want to watch a YouTube video to tell me that.
Mm-hmm.
So would I watch something like a lore video for Path of Exile? Yes. Would I watch a build guide ever? No. It could be the best build guide ever made. I would maybe watch it at that point to be like, okay, how can I make my content better based on this video? But just as a player, if I wasn't a content creator, when I was just a POE player, I never watched any Path of Exile content on YouTube. Zero. Outside of official GGG announcements.
Okay. I mean, I watched a lot of people because I found them interesting, but not so much their information. Like, yeah, I've always liked Cute Dog for a while. I just find his stuff very interesting overall, and the way he works some of his highlights. You mentioned the one person who trolls their chat the whole time. Have you ever watched Cute Dog's streams where he does crafting?
Nope.
Okay. He's like, all right, Awakened Orb. Okay, we haven't used Awakened Orbs for a while here. What does it go? We want the which base? Which base goes first? And he'll click the wrong base and like hover over. Yeah. That let's read it again. Yeah, that seems right. Whatever, you know what I mean? And the whole chat's going on. No, wasting money to drive please chat don't. No, well, he doesn't do it. He baits it the whole time, and then sometimes he does it on purpose. And then sometimes
you've got to actually click though.
Sometimes he does, and sometimes he doesn't. Okay, you can't always do the whole thing. That is too much. So it's just like, it's the whole, is he pretending to be stupid or is he not? You know what I mean? That whole thing. So people who watch him for a while know that he's just acting, and the people who aren't on there don't know that, and they're freaking out. So it's like kind of like this whole bait song and dance thing. So I find that sort of stuff really funny. I guess because I'm in on the joke and I know that he's screwing around and the other people don't. Just watching their interaction is really funny because people can't help themselves, right? Everyone wants to just help people, right? So like, no, don't do that. Like, don't make the mistake. You know what I mean? Like, people are so eager to like stop you from doing something bad, like something innate in us. So it's like playing into that.
That reminds me of something very funny from Harvest. When I was streaming during Harvest, people would try to stop me from making a mistake so often when I just casually do non-X to X. And they'd be like, no, you haven't. You're going to delete a good affix. You're going to delete a good affix.
Dude, I did that. I delete. I did a demo of how to make the exploding chest, and then I hit the wrong thing. There's a clip somewhere. Sorry. Completely an accident, not baiting.
Yeah, I'd have things like, oh, this is amazing ES helmet. The suffixes are god tier, and it's got T1 flat, T1%, and then it's got like mana. I'm just gonna slam a non-defense to defense on that thing. And people are like, no, you could eat a suffix. No, you can't. You can't eat a suffix. The rules say non-tagged modifier becomes the tagged modifier. The only tagged modifier that can appear on this helmet is a prefix, hybrid energy shield life or hybrid energy shield stun block recovery. It must add a prefix or the craft will fail. Therefore, it must remove a prefix or the craft will fail. I cannot damage my suffixes because I understand the way the tags interact and that is my only option. But now, if it had an open prefix and I do non-defense to defense, then it just grabs a suffix and ruins the item.
Yeah. But you run into those situations where people don't understand the nuance of the certain thing, and then they think that they're trying to help, but they're just wrong. Or whatever. Yeah, that happens
it's why
a lot of the times.
I never make POBs on stream anymore, because there are so many people who are trying to help legitimately, and they don't understand the context enough, and it is just a torrent of completely unhelpful advice, and then one comment that's really good, and I'm just like, I don't want to read the 9 unhelpful things that just happened to get that one good one. I'd rather do it off stream, and I'll find out that helpful thing after I play the build, and this aspect sucks, and I'll just make it better later.
Yeah. Oh man, I missed some opportunities. I didn't want to interrupt you when you were like, yeah, I don't really watch Path of Exile videos. I was gonna be like, oh, so you're the guy who's been clicking to my videos and just looking at the POB. You're one of those guys.
Well, I don't think I've taken a POB from a build guide in 4 years, 5 years. Unless
how do you go about learning mechanics from POE Ninja and then reverse engineering, or what? You memorize all the items?
POE Ninja is a lot of it, and just experimentation. Like the last time I took something from a build guide was when my intent was to test the build guide. Like, what is the, Shack Central cold dot experience? Mm-hmm. Then I'll take the POB from build guide. But if I'm just making a build for myself, I'll look on POE Ninja and I'll find someone who's probably a random Korean and look and go, wait, that's a neat item. I see what you're doing there. All right, let's see, can we work with this? And I'll build off of that, and I'll make it better, because I'll take this other guy's POB, this other guy's character. They're also doing something cool, but they're different things. And they don't really overlap. They kind of do, but they don't really. And I layer those, and then I end up with a build I'm happy with.
That's mostly what I do too. But I watch other people's things to learn certain concepts sometimes, or just see what other people are doing. And it's a combination of thinking them myself, you know what I mean, or just realizing them myself, knowing other tricks that other people have found out or I find interesting. Sometimes it's people asking me to review other people's things and asking me, what's your opinion on this? Am I going to have a good time on this build or not have a good time? So I get linked a lot of stuff. So I'm looking at POBs because of that and going, okay, this is, how much money do you have? Oh, you have 2x? Do you have a budget version of this somewhere in the file? No, that's your only one? That's 500x, bro.
I used to get that. I don't as much anymore. And I think that's because a lot of the time I would just tell people it's a bad idea. And they're like, but the video looks so cool. And it's like, well, of course it does.
Yeah.
That's the point.
That's the point of making the video, making it look cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's why league starters never do good, because other people are showcasing 10x, 20x, and I'm showing like 40C for Link. But people come back to it after they failed their first 3 builds and play it and go, wow, actually, this was really good.
Yeah, I
get
learned
their
early
like
on
residual.
that for league starter builds, I keep what I play separate from what I suggest for people to play. Because
sneaky.
Here's the thing with, if I try to give someone mine, it'll be like 10x investment day 2.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I'll have that. That is exactly what I'm going to do. And I replicated that. But then people are like, but I couldn't do that because the 10x investment day 2 was 40 or 50x by the time they actually got to it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would give them like this one. I actually played all the stuff that I put out there, you know what I mean, from league start. So it's kind of like, follow what I did. You're just a couple days behind, or weeks, or a month behind. But yeah, I gave them the stepping stones of 40C, 1x, 5x, you know what I mean? That sort of thing. Like, you could farm the thing to get from point A to point B, and then B to C, and then C to D. You know what I mean? That's so thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because perfect example of this, my Corrupting Fever build, on something like day 2, 3, I had a bow. And those bows, to get a proper one, 14x. I paid like 4 for mine because it was miscrafted. Someone had either recombinated 2 bows together or done a suffix to prefix that they shouldn't have, and it had no dot multi. Everything else was on there, and I think what they did is they were doing suffix to prefix to save money on the CatmasterOP maw for the last step, because I think they used a warlord base or something like that. I don't know. I could be wrong on what happened. I don't know the story of the bow. What I know is it cost me 4x. And then I had that, and a bunch of people who were following my progress were like, how did you get this? This is so expensive. And I had to say, well, I just had a live search up. And this happened. Yeah. And it's why I say, you know, if you want to follow a guide for your leveling experience, look at what Grimro put together for this. If you want to follow my character and my progress, look at what I did. Here's the progress.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mean by keeping things separate, that I advised most people follow what Grimro recommends for low level stuff. I did it differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm almost always going to do it differently because I know little tricks that are going to get me ahead. I know that I can just, you know, flip cluster jewels. I'm not telling everyone to do that, and I don't think everyone should. I don't think everyone would have a good time with it.
Well, even if they did, it would ruin the entire market. So there's all those little strategies too.
Yeah.
If you suggest that thing, it changes the market. So
yeah,
you're about the, I mean, we're both at the size where whatever we recommend is going to change it a little bit. And
it's why I don't,
weird.
Yeah. It's why I don't put prices on things anymore unless it's deterministic. So for the bow, I put a price because it costs you 14x. It is, you do this benchcraft, then this benchcraft, then this benchcraft, and you get your result.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of other stuff, I might say, I bought this for this much.
Mm-hmm.
Then I did this. But it's all estimates and it's all vague. I don't say, you know, this is the 10x version of my build anymore. Because it's the 10x version today. Tomorrow, is it 5x? 50x? I don't know. We'll see. Depends on how many views this video gets.
Yeah, to a certain extent on some of it. It depends. Like when I'm doing the around 10x, it's usually things that are tier 3, 4 uniques that probably it's going to be. But
yeah,
I could get let's say that I just have an amazing league where I'm getting way more views than I should. I probably am setting myself up in a position where I could get really screwed. And people are going to be really mad.
Yeah, and I tend to like a lot of the more complicated mechanical interactions. So there's a good chance, even if it's a tier 3 or 4 unique, it's not one of the ones on most people's filters.
Mhm.
And so if I start talking about it, there is a decent chance that the price is going to spike. I remember that happened when I talked about Shield Crush. Because I was using, I forget what it's called. It's the blind weapon that I believe is from Lab. And
Like
that thing,
like Casade, that one that
no,
bids you never met. Wait, which
no,
one?
no, the weapon that,
No, that I've never used that one. Oh, okay. Like it does something, it blinds nearby enemies or something like that, and then does damage or something.
the Dark Seer.
If they're okay, yeah, that. Okay.
Yeah, I used that because it was a great way to go crit Shield Crush back in 3.15. Almost everyone was RT. I went crit. I was able to do that because I had the Dark Seer. I specifically remember that when I was buying mine, it was a 30C item for a perfect corrupted one. And that went up to like 15 exalts.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I put a price, I say, oh, well, you know, it's a 10C unique, you can get a corrupted one for 30C. No, it's a 1X unique. You can get a corrupted one for 15. But
Yeah, that's a hard thing for people to understand.
yeah,
Do you need the corruption or not need the corruption or whatever? So
yeah. But it was really cool because it let me leverage a bunch of other mechanics, whereas most people playing Shield Crush were RT. I could go crit specifically because I was using that weapon.
gotcha. Yeah, most people were using the attack speed 3 green socket for 36.
Yep. And with that, I mean, it also works. You go RT, you lose maybe 20% DPS. I just didn't see any reason to lose 20% DPS when I found this really cool interaction off of some obscure POE ninja character that was using it for something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're using it for Spectral Shield Throw. It's like, wait, oh, they're cold conversion Spectral Shield Throw using that. Okay, I see what you're doing. You're using it in a completely different way from how I would, though. I would go melee crit with the more crit thing to make up for the base crit. This gives me ideas.
What's the most egregious path of building that you've ever seen that was misstated? Like way overstated.
Oh, that's a hard one because
I'll tell you mine while you think, okay? You half listen here while you think of this.
Okay.
Mine happened today. Someone's build said it was 478 million DPS on the spider, the Carly Fang thing.
Mm-hmm.
Looked at their POB and go, okay. Went to the config thing. No boss on. They're stacking curses, which get 60 whatever percent less. Change it, it goes from 476 to 40, like 8 or 47. Look at their config. They have blah blah for the jewel. But the jewel's already stated in the thing. Take that out. Okay, we're down to 40. Okay, and then there's some other assumptions. Okay, in there. But basically, it went down to about 33 mil from 470. Honestly, like, it was still fine. Probably for the gear investment, 33 was pretty good. So it still was good. It's just they advertise as 476.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But their idea wasn't bad or anything. And like I said, 33 on their budget was really good, actually. Yeah. So.
Yeah. The reason I'm having a hard time is over the years, I have seen a lot of really egregious stuff, but some of it's just absurd. I remember seeing a build where it had something like 100 mil DPS and everything looks fine. I'm like, this shouldn't have that much DPS. This shouldn't have that much. I go all the way down and I get to a random jewel and it just has the word headhunter buffs. 400% more damage, 800% more attack speed, like blah, 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 all down the list. It's like, why does, Bliss Cluster have that? Label it. Also, your build isn't even wearing a headhunter anymore. You had a Stygian Vice on. Why do you have your head under buff jewel on? And there's stuff like that. But I'm trying to remember the worst one, because I am thinking of the worst as the one that a player is most likely to play the build without understanding. And I think the worst I've seen in that regard is a POB from a very well-known Path of Exile channel here on YouTube that someone might know as the channel that sells their POBs to people for access. And the problem was that none of the items looked all that expensive or all that out of place, except they were all legacy items that this entire POB was clearly from just 2 or 3 leagues before, and it was not possible to get these things. This accounted for over 50% of the damage and a lot of the survivability as well, because that was when Fossil Mod had their own signature mods, and that had been removed. And I think that was the most egregious case. One, because it is a product that is sold for money. I think there's debate as to whether or not you can legally or should legally even be selling a POB code. But to put that whole moral, ethical, and legal concern aside, it was wrong and it was outdated, and you could not reproduce this because the only way to get some of those modifiers was influences, and the only way to get others was, well, you have to play standard. They are gone.
But it was like a recent video that they put out after it was not possible to get, or you just came upon it and it was from 3 leagues ago when it was possible.
So someone showed me the POB because they said this was their build and it wasn't working, and they wanted to know why.
Okay. But did they click into a 1-year-old video and not tell you that part?
I honestly don't know.
Okay. Because that could have happened too. See, that's my worried with some of the stuff, why I have my videos, right?
But my argument is still, if you are selling that POB, you need to do your due diligence and take that down if it is not accurate.
Yeah.
Then again,
people sell POBs. I didn't realize that people
one
sell
specific
POBs.
Website sells POBs.
Man, I'm in the wrong business, huh?
I've
been helping people with POBs for free for years.
They sell everything.
Yeah,
and the entire point of their guides is to do things wrong and to funnel players into their website to buy things to fix it, which is a completely different story.
Does that have a very, very searchable name and have over 100? Okay.
Yes, it does. And it surprises me to this day that GGG has not taken it down, because based on what they do and based on the terms of service for Path of Exile, they're very clearly in violation.
Yeah.
I would assume it is because of something that is outside of a picture, but that feels to me like a situation where I would be much more in favor of, even if it hurts the game's growth somewhat, that should be taken down, because it is a clear violation of everything the game stands for. And not because of the selling POBs part. I don't really agree with it, but I also don't know if it's legal. That would depend on things that I don't understand about copyright law. But assuming that it's legal,
who knows nowadays when it comes to the copyright law? Because it's all gray. Everything's a gray area.
Yeah, it's an instance of a thing for a tool for a game. Like, I don't know at that point. But even if I didn't have a problem with that, I would have a problem with this website, because everything else they are doing is very much not allowed and is in some cases outright illegal, because Path of Exile says, if you are breaking our terms of service, you are not allowed to use our content to break our terms of service. Note, I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand the law. I could be wrong about that.
I mean, there has to be some reason that they haven't taken it down, right?
Yeah, I just don't know what it is.
It could be that it's hosted from another country and they tried, and they could, but it would be really hard legally, or they'd have to petition the ISB or something. You know,
I guarantee it's hosted from another country.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not New Zealand, right?
Yeah, and what I don't know. It's not like you can nuke a channel too. Wouldn't they just re-upload every single thing? So you'd have to take down their website with it. So it's like it's one of those things too. Okay, yeah, maybe their subscriber count or whatever. What's more shocking to me is that they get a ton of views and have a very large. I think they have more than Zizaran does in subscribers.
Yeah, and I would bet that Zizaran gets more views though.
Probably.
Because what I also would bet,
but they do get a lot.
Yes, if you look
a lot
at
more than they should. I think you should nuke them just so I get those impressions. Give me them impressions, buddy.
I wonder though how the returning viewership looks like, because I feel like those are the sorts of build guides that cause people to quit and hate Path of Exile. That give such a bad experience by design. Okay.
No, because they went in there, ready to swipe that credit card, and then after they did, they got the results. And also they didn't know what they were doing, so they don't know walked away happy.
So this is going to turn into a rant about something else. Fair warning. I don't think
is okay. Should I stop you from yourself? Was that a plea to stop you, or
that is are you okay with a topic hard shifting?
Yeah, I'm fine with that, but I don't know what you're gonna say now. Now I'm all worried.
Pay to win game design.
Okay.
It is the exact same principle.
Yeah.
That you want someone to pay. Therefore, you have an entry purchase. In the case of that channel, the entry purchase is buying the POE, which, as I remember, is not very expensive. It's like $6, $1, a relatively small purchase. Now, in most pay-to-win games, very early on, you'll be offered a high-value pack with some absurd made-up number, 10,000% value, 800% value, 500% value, 50% off, 90% off, just to get you to accept that, yes, I am going to spend money here, and I'm rewarded for spending money. From there, the game also presents its best content and best gameplay early on in the experience. This is why in so many pay-to-win games, people who play them for 1 or 2 hours go, I don't know why people are complaining. I haven't had to spend a penny and it's been great. That is by design because the entire thing is a trap. It is to build habits. You want to build habits so someone comes back to your game. Genshin Impact, for example, does this with resin. Many other games do it with dailies to get you to put it down because you cannot make progress and then come back later. It becomes part of your daily habit. Thus, you're more likely to keep playing even if other aspects bother you. Next up, they start adding in the monetization systems. This is where we get complexity for the sake of complexity. Things are often very obscure, like figuring out timeless jewel obscure. But ultimately, it boils down to you do the thing a lot without understanding it, and eventually it works because you've put in enough money. Upgrading your gear and min-maxing it in Black Desert Online, for example. Very complicated to understand saving fail stacks, relative to you just brute force it by spending lots of money. The idea is someone won't be able to understand fail stacking, and if they can't find a guide on it, they will just spend money and brute force. Because the players with a lot of money who are looking to pay from the start won't really care.
That was my point. Is that I think they get a lot of return and those people don't care. I don't think it seems odd to you, but
so I think most of their so-called returning viewers outgrow those builds because those are presented as new player or budget builds, and that where the return goes is a different channel that is known for high-end builds and has run footage at double time before. And I suspect that is where most of their paying, customers end up. But what happens is a lot of other people try it. They have an experience that starts out great. I bet most of their builds are spectacular in the acts. But then, as you get into white maps, they get worse. As you get into yellows, they get bad. And as you get into red maps, they're terrible. Just like pay to win. The early leveling experience in any pay-to-win game is going to be good.
I think you're overstating how much thought that the person that put that thing went into it. The last time I looked, because when I first was starting to make content, I looked at a bunch of things, and I watched some of those videos, and my thought was, how do they have so many subscribers? And then I realized the second part, but I watched some of them and I was like, these are all just terrible, just terrible. And
Right.
I assure you, the leveling experience was just as terrible at the time when I watched. Like, I don't know, maybe they've adapted in 2 years, but when I watched some of their videos like 2 years ago, it was not good.
I haven't seen any of your videos. I have been linked several of their POBs. What I've always noticed is it's something that works well for leveling.
Okay.
So maybe they've changed that, but it's things like, oh, this is I'm trying to remember what it was. I would like to say it was a Spectre build that leveled with golems back when golems were OP. It's like, oh, well, of course you can have a good experience leveling with a couple of clay shapers in your golems. Yeah, that's a great time.
Hey, I feel perfect. I feel personally attacked. This was my leveling guide, okay, 2 years ago. It worked out great. A lot of people were happy, so
Yeah.
screw you, man.
Hey, I'm saying it's a good thing. I'm saying it was a good
I don't know.
leveling
I sense a lot of hostility there. I'm a little bit,
Well, the
I
Spectre
feel
build
attacked.
was where the Spectre build is where it got bad.
Okay.
The Spectre build was terrible.
Okay.
He used Necro Aegis. But that alone, the only time you wanted to use that is when you were saying, I don't care about living. I'm going to give up the best defensive ascendancy node in the game.
Wow. You managed to insult me and other people at the same time. I think it was, I forgot who it was, but there was a giant debate about this. I forgot which side people were on. It's either Baylor or Ghazi. One of them stands by the using Necro all the time, and there I think was a heated debate between the two. So,
I can tell you exactly.
Okay,
Baylor's on the side of you never use Necro.
Okay,
and I completely agree with him, because by the time you can use it and have a tangible benefit to your build that does not cost you survivability, you have invested so much that it doesn't matter, or you're standing next to an Aura bot. I can see exactly why someone would argue for it if they meet those two conditions. But if you're talking about low level stuff, you're just getting into red maps. No, you need those block nodes. Your Spectres back then did so much damage, so much more than you ever needed. You did not need to give them frenzy charges. That was a thing on top. That's the thing about my builds. I build quality of life first. Dying to make a number bigger in POB, not something I'm going to do. There were more arguments to be made for it when the damage was actually relevant, but at the time, Spectres in particular, back when there were the Veritania ones, I think, is ever Veritania or Slave Drivers before they got nerfed at all, and you had builds with 1 billion Spectre DPS, just a level 20 gem, you have like 12 mil. You don't need more than that.
Back when Spectres, you didn't need as high level to get more of them, and you could get up to like 6, and then their level went to outrageous.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
right. And so it's like, why are you using Necro Aegis? You don't need that. You're just making.
I don't think you realize a lot of people play softcore because they like to do one thing: give me those damage numbers. Yeah, give them to me. And that's all they care about.
Broke that feeling in me, because I'd make a change to my build and be like, wait, if Uber Elder kills still 3 minutes and 8 seconds, I added 10 million DPS in POB and nothing actually changed. Why did I do that? And since then, I'll test it in game and I'll see, do I feel a difference? If I can't feel a difference, it's not relevant. There's always a point where your damage and defenses will get to a point that it is not relevant. And anything beyond that is for the sake of vanity. I say it for my own builds. I say, I didn't need this much. I didn't even need half of this. I did it to make the number bigger. Don't do that. Don't do that unless you know it is only making the number bigger. It has no functional purpose for my build.
It's hard for people to discern those two of when it matters for a set. And a lot of them is it's a feels thing, right? You got to play it and feel that out, and that's one of the things that I really don't like about POB or just the numbers or something.
Yeah,
people
and
don't
even worse-
understand the uptime or like the realistic level. Like, okay, you have wow, okay, we went in there and we checked all projectiles hit. You have 50 projectiles. Their spread is like this, and you're checking a box that says they all hit.
I remember seeing that with a Forbidden Right POB, where it was using Awakened GMP, and it was also using Dying Sun. And I tested GMP plus Dying Sun, and my projectiles were not consistently hitting at all.
But POB though,
yeah, in POB it doubled your DPS.
Anyways, that's why sometimes that's why sometimes it's bad.
Yeah,
until you test it, and the game's so obscure. There's so many little things to test. It's like, okay, well, actually, you want this number or lower,
mm-hmm.
And that's why we're in business. To some extent, right?
To some extent. And then there's a lot of games that, to go back a little bit to the pay to win topic.
Okay.
There's a lot of games that degrade the gameplay experience because they want money out of the end user. And I always feel like sometimes your experience will be degraded by changes in Path of Exile, but at least you know it is not because GGG wants you to have just bad enough of a time that you go into the shop and you buy it. I guess you could argue some of the armor's base armor looks really ugly because they want you to buy MTX. I am the sort of person that sometimes I get to level 95 on a character and I'm like, wait, it's not wearing MTX. Maybe I should fix that. If aesthetic is really important, maybe it does degrade your experience a little bit because of that. I feel like Path of Exile is one of the fairest systems of monetization that I've seen. It's definitely the fairest free-to-play game. And I think that it's very important for the industry that developers see there are other ways. You don't have to use an example that someone else you interviewed talked about. You don't have to be a Zynga. You don't have to build your game around one person spending money to beat another person. Or you don't have to build your game around just dailies and logins and
getting a Subtractem interview. So there's more of these interviews and you should totally check them out. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Gotta plug the
you were gonna not even let me plug? You didn't even mention that there's another interview. What are you doing here, man?
I tried to give you the opening. I took
it. I took it. Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So that's a thing. And there's also a big difference, to go back to game design, because that's something that has always fascinated me. I learned through school that I didn't want to be a game designer because I don't like the technical coding aspects. But I like game design and I like the concept of it. And I like looking at why some games work and why others don't. Right now, we're seeing a lot of games with live services that don't work because the game was made for a different audience. We're seeing MMOs like New World. New World innately didn't work because it was made as a hardcore, full loot PvP, survival grindy kind of game. And then it was kind of shifted halfway through of, wait, no one's going to play that. People hate that. We're going to get like 10,000 players who think we are the best thing ever made. And never more than that. We're never going to get 10,001 because that 10,001st player comes in. A max level character shoots them. Oh, they're dead. They respawn. Oh, maybe that was bad luck. Guy comes up behind him with an axe. Dead. Not a good game for mass market and mass appeal. Instead, they got over 1 million players at launch, and no one stuck around. Had a lot of good things. It was an absolute irredeemable mess because every time they went in to fix something, they actually broke more. And it wasn't until I played New World that I gained a massive amount of respect for the things that GGG has fixed, even when leagues launch imperfectly. Because in New World, they disabled trade for over a month because they couldn't fix item dupe bugs. And GGG has never done that. They've never turned something critical to the game off for over a month because they couldn't fix the issue. And it certainly gave me a lot more respect for Chris and his team and their ability to handle issues. It's not perfect. There are things like the ultimatum issue that I do think that should have never happened. But
Are you talking about the one that they got banned over?
no, the ultimatum issue with GGG and their tables or page size that was causing the game to crash. Yeah, that.
You mean okay? You mean like the login?
Yeah,
all those things. Yeah,
that's,
and then not only that, and the other one where they didn't migrate people's characters.
Yeah,
that was a pretty.
Yeah, that's a okay. Well, that shouldn't have happened.
By the way, I took off of work for that, and then didn't get to play it all both those times, so I was pretty pissed.
Yeah, that reminds me of another topic: general gaming and also Path of Exile. The whole taking work off and then being pissed thing. On the one hand, I get it. I've been there. I've been mad. On the other hand, don't take it out on the developers. Don't make personal attacks. They are just as pissed and just as stressed as you are. And just have a little empathy there. It's okay to be mad. Be like, I hate that I can't play POE when I took the time off.
Yeah. And that's really frustrating when a lot of people don't get very much vacation. So it's kind of like that whole thing or whatever. Or maybe that was the whole thing and they schedule all the plans and that didn't work. So I can see where they're mad. But yeah, personally attacking people is silly. But yeah, those are the two of the times that I think were the worst. Also, what the heck was the patch that happened a couple days ago that just broke everything? Good thing they did it in the league was already going down, and then they're just like, oh, we're gonna do this patch, and it ruined it, and then just went. Everyone's like, oh, I guess we're done.
I bet they saved the changes until later on.
Now they do. They're like, we'll beta test on the real live one so that we don't screw up the league launch. Oh. You know, I'm actually okay with that.
I mean, not quite what I meant, but
okay,
a little
what did
bit.
You mean?
I mean, they have a patch where they're like, okay, we think this fixes or changes or resolves stuff, but there's a lot of live code involved, and 1 in 6,000 times we got this issue. We don't know how that's going to replicate on a live server with all these instances. We're going to wait. We're going to wait 2 months till most people aren't playing our game, and we're going to push it. Now, hopefully nothing goes wrong. Hopefully it's brilliant. And if so, pat the dev team on the back, pat the server team on the back. Good job. If it breaks, if we need to do a rollback, that's the nuclear option. Otherwise, we just have a second patch ready to undo it, fix everything real quick. Because then...
Wait, how is that different from what I was saying? Except for I said it in a little bit more inflammatory way.
Well, I think the intent, kind of, that it's the intent is always to not have things break, but there's certain...
I knew that. Okay, I was...
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, okay. I was playing it up, okay?
Yeah, fair.
Okay.
I had... After the 3.14 dev manifesto, I don't like people playing things up.
Gotcha.
That I tend to push back on that because I saw how much toxic hyperbole got involved there. And the negative effect that it still has on a lot of the player base.
Yeah, that is true to a certain extent, but I mean, gotta let the memes fly from time to time.
Yeah, I mean, I still say, hey, let's feel the weight of this. It's just
I don't understand. I don't get that. I don't know that meme. Feel the weight of this?
You've never heard Chris say feel the weight of an item?
Yeah, that. But okay, yeah, I didn't know that was where you were going with it.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, that's where it gets memed a lot.
I mean, the streamer client gets memed a lot.
I remember getting a comment on my video once of I had made a joke about, tomorrow at the streamer client meeting, I'll ask Chris about this. Someone thought I could actually do that. They're like, could you pass this on? It's like, I can't tell if you're just really good at playing along and you made this whole elaborate fake question.
Satire is dead. Satire is dead.
That I'm actually able to talk to Chris Wilson. And I would love to be able to just talk to Chris Wilson. I wouldn't want to waste his time over something as trivial as the thing I was joking about. Because it was something trivial. It was just like, in the streamer client meeting tomorrow, I'm going to ask Chris Wilson how many mirror drops I've gotten that I've just never seen. Like, you know, you close an instance and it would have dropped a mirror kind of thing. It was an offhand nonsense joke like that. If I had a direct line to Chris Wilson, I would never waste his time with something that trivial.
Are you trying to convince me or Chris Wilson?
You that
Oh, okay.
yeah, like I just
Are you sure? I'm not convinced.
I mean, maybe Chris watches my videos. I don't know. I don't know what he does in his job.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah, I did a little bit of coding in school, not very much. I hated it. I did enough to know that you could have full confidence that your code is going to work fine. And you bug tested everything. You couldn't find any bugs, and you hit that run button and it explodes. And
so what do you learn from that?
Yeah.
You learn that you suck at knowing at testing. Yeah. That's what you learned.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Or in my case, you learn that you just don't enjoy coding because you find it fun up until the point where you remember all the different functions and all the specific use cases, and you're like, yeah, but I just want to focus on the level layout here, man. I don't want to have to worry about to make my character not clip through walls. Come on.
So my uncle came in for 4th of July and he told me that he could beat the 3200 chess computer.
Mm-hmm.
Which obviously, like, GMs aren't 3200, right? There's no way this guy can beat it. So he showed me that he could beat it.
And I'm guessing that was your video, because I saw on your channel.
Yeah, those were the bugs that... Okay, so there's a bug on it. I'll just ruin those videos. They didn't get very much anyways. So perfect part in here. So basically, it's a dev assume that they're going to hit a button that says, like, select next, but you actually could just move a piece. So he would select the engine, but the engine gets reset when you hit the button, and instead he moved a piece, which ends you in a state where it says 3200 and you're playing the top bot, but you're actually playing the null default bot, which is 250, which is utter garbage.
Oh,
and that's on chess.com, and I don't think that they patched it yet. I'm not sure if they did or not, or saw the video because it didn't get very many. But anyways, it's a kind of like junior web dev bug that is probably pretty common. It's not the first time I've seen that specific thing. So when he showed it to me, it took me like 30 minutes to figure out what was going on.
Yeah. My favorite, in terms of all the bugs I've seen in all the games I've played, my favorite is always bugs that revolve around overflow and underflow.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many of them. Dealing no damage with Ignite in Path of Exile, making yourself immune to damage by max shock effect, or max less shock effect because negative shock effect is less damage taken. Or in other games, in Final Fantasy, I don't remember which one, but there was one where you could heal an enemy with a potion and it would kill them instantly because their health overflows.
Gotcha.
And there's just so many cool and weird things you can do.
Yeah.
By going, aha, but you are not an enemy. You are a computer, and I will treat you as one.
Yeah, because it's behind the scenes how it's coded. So usually there's basically what he's talking about is buffer overflow. So when you're storing values in something, there's a limit to how many values when you reserve the memory. And in a lot of languages nowadays, like it protects against this. But if you're using something like C or a lot of other languages, it doesn't protect you at all versus this. So you just write over that value and it's going to write into a different memory location. And actually, even in console things, is pretty common, like in Ocarina of Time. There's certain manipulations you could do to write into memory locations to, like, swap out your bottle for other items. That one's one of the ones that I'm very much aware of. But that's like the concept of it. And for Ocarina of Time, you also can overwrite the memory location of where you're going to warp to and then play a song. Instead of you going to one place, you can go to like the final level and stuff. So there's some pretty crazy bugs with that. So yeah.
Yeah, they're neat. I remember also
it's really cool. I can't believe people actually even find those, by the way. The speed.
There was one, I forget the specifics here, but when Diablo 3 had the real money auction house, the value of gold got ruined because there was a max stack size of, I think, 2.1 billion. And there was something where you are either buying or selling one over the max stack, and it would duplicate it. I think it was you're selling, and then you cancel the order or something. Or maybe you sell that and then you buy it from yourself. I don't remember the specifics. All I remember is a ton of gold got duped because there was an overflow that then caused it to go, I don't know what's going on here. I'm just going to give it to you, and I'm going to give it back to the other person, and I'm going to assume that's what I was supposed to do.
Yeah, because that's how it was written, and other people didn't account. So there's another big one that I remember from that, and that's that I think the auction houses were based off of your local clock for some reason. And what you could do is set yourself in a different time zone or something like that, and then launch the game and do something weird with the auctions to manipulate them. I remember that being a problem with Diablo 3 as well. Something
Probably
like
forced
that.
them to expire.
Something like that. Something like that. Or could buy them, like buy out before anyone else could. Or I don't know. So something like that. That's just like, what the heck? Yeah, such crazy stuff. There's a meme about a programmer has to work on a program to buy beer. So he orders I think it's 3 beers, or he orders 1 beer, 3 beers, 0 beers, negative like some exciting number of beers, infinity beers. He orders 3 beers, not BEER, like animal beers. And then he I forgot what the other thing is. I think it's like, and then he attempts to leave without paying. And that's like a good illustration of the crazy stuff that people will put in to inputs that you aren't expecting. Like, well, that's not a thing. Why would anyone try to order 3 beers the animal?
Yeah, I've heard a couple variations on that one.
Okay.
For the ending. I've also heard someone asks where the bathroom is and everything explodes. Someone orders water and everything explodes.
Yeah, okay, that maybe that was part of it. Orders water, you know, tries to go to the bathroom, but then tries to leave, stop paying or something. But basically, yeah, that's what dealing with software stuff is like. So I've seen insane amounts of issues. And they weren't in games, they were in financial systems.
Oh, that's even scarier.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
As much as you have to have a certain level of accuracy for a game, the bar for financial systems has to be so much higher. Because you can't just go, oops, someone just duplicated 1,000 of those. We'll just let them keep it and make sure no one can do it again and maybe ban their account. It's like, no, those are US dollars. You can't just let those exist.
Well, it wasn't trading in that sense. It'd be like inventory things. Or so transactions got duplicated that shouldn't have been.
Yeah,
then usually the accountants have to true it up, and then the balance sheet doesn't balance.
Yeah. I had to contact GGG support once about that. I bought a supporter pack and I was charged twice. And I don't know why, but support was super helpful. I swear that it was under an hour before they emailed me back. They're like, all resolved.
But yeah, it gets very scary when it's business stuff and not even game stuff in there. You would think that there's less bugs. I don't think there are. After doing it for so many years, I'm honestly pretty astounded that we're all still here and catastrophic things haven't happened.
I think it's just there's more safeguards against the catastrophic things. And it's why so many people have a story of, oh, I had this bad experience with the system. The bugs are bad enough that a person will have a bad experience, not bad enough that the entire thing just explodes.
Did you hear the there was something that occurred on Hawaii where they have their nuclear defense system warning that there's incoming nukes, and some intern hit the wrong button, and they're both like, it's very easy, but something happened with it. It's basically on the same panel, very easy to do that. Hit the wrong thing. The entire like island thought that incoming nuke, thought the world was gonna end for like an hour.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of stories like that, and that's what I mean by it's one step short of catastrophic.
Yeah.
They had the extra checks to make sure it wasn't, oh, it also automatically launches all the nukes.
Yeah, exactly. Really exactly. But I'm like, oh, it's so close, man. It's so the counter thing, you know? Exactly. It was so close.
At least it doesn't automatically launch all the nukes.
Yeah, yeah. One of my engineering professors used to mess with the other professors on planes. And he used to, whenever he'd go on planes, he's an aero engineer, and he'd say, "This plane was designed by C students." It's got probably true, right? Like,
probably. I mean,
probably made everyone very, very nervous. But.
Yeah. It's funny. So many indie games I play and I don't find any bugs, and then I realize that's because I just played that indie game, and if it's a roguelite, maybe I play it for 200-300 hours. But if it's just an RPG, I play it for 20-40 hours. Great experience. I don't find any bugs. Maybe I wouldn't find any bugs in Path of Exile if I played it for 40 hours either.
Mm-hmm.
But I've probably played Path of Exile for 10,000 hours. And the more you play it, and the bigger your player base, naturally the more bugs that are going to be found. I think it's probably safe to say at this point that any game that finds a decently sized audience, the audience's ability to find things will exceed the developers. And
yeah,
the developer,
and that should be pretty given.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand that. Like, okay, let's say hypothetically you wanted to catch every single thing. You'd have to hire a team of like 2,000 testers and then pay them all X amount, and then that's ridiculous. Or you could have a player base of like a couple 100,000 people, and they're playing nonstop. Of course, the people who play the game 16 hours a day or something, 100,000 of those is going to be like find the things, and they're going to do different things than what the developers do because they're all different people behaving different ways. So they're not going to enter the same inputs like, my uncle did. He's going to move the piece instead of hitting the buttons. Well, when you test to do that. Okay, sorry, I cut you off a little bit there. What was your point?
I don't remember, but I remember another point that in a lot of games like Skyrim, Witcher 3, etc., I ended up in places that I wasn't really supposed to get to, because in games that have open or even closed worlds, I have, one might say, an obsession with finding the invisible walls and then trying to find a way around that invisible wall. It's not productive. I would be far more productive to do literally anything else. But that wall is telling me that I can't go there. Therefore, for the sake of science, I must discover what is beyond it. Or I'll find out that I actually can't pass it and be like, good job, devs. You win this time. I'll find another wall, though. I will get you.
Yeah, it's crazy. As soon as you have some sort of open world, you have so many bugs that just immediately open up.
Yeah, or I think the best open world experiences I've had are closed worlds that appear open, where you will look at the world, and if you look at the world map, it looks like you can go anywhere, anytime, and do anything. If you actually go through the game, there's a path, then there's another path, and then there's a third path over here. There are branching paths that encourage gameplay in certain directions and give you content along each of those directions. And that when a game is truly open world, it usually ever feels a little bit too empty, or I get exploration fatigue, and I get about 40 hours into the game. I've explored 80% of a map, and I just stop playing. I never finish it. For The Witcher 3, the story was that threat. You can actually go almost anywhere, but the story kept me going through to the point where it's a long game. It's so long that CDPR made their next game, Cyberpunk, shorter. I played through it twice. I voluntarily played through it again, despite the length, because it was a meaningful experience at every step. Did I get a little fatigued fighting bandits for the 80th time? Did I kind of wish that I could do the bridge quest with most bandits where I go, see this medallion? What guild is this? Yeah, that's right, I'm a witcher. Go rob someone else. Just move on, not have to fight the bandits. But there were enough meaningful experiences through the main story and the side quests. It didn't cause me to quit. It caused me to look at my quest log and go, wait, what should I be doing here? And as you play a game over and over and over again, or as you play a game for a long time, be it Path of Exile, be it Witcher 3 or anything, certain aspects start to become common. And one thing that's always really interesting to me is to see someone's first experiences with a game, because it is often unique both to that person and also to the game. Someone who has played Path of Exile for 10,000 hours will not see the game in the same way as someone who has played for 0 hours. You'll have a much deeper and more nuanced understanding of the person who has played for 0 hours. But it's an incredible experience to see the joy and wonder at simple things, like discovering Kaduku. You're not going to get excited about that. I'm not going to get excited about that. I mean, maybe you are. I don't know you that well. But for most of us, it's Kaduku.
When I see Kaduku, it's like, wow, we found him again.
Yeah.
I didn't even know how possible it was to experience so much joy right now. I do a little dance and all. I get you.
But for a new player,
keep going.
Kaduku is the first boss that is just there. That you're just going along and it's a boss. Why is it there? I don't know. You know, the Dweller of the Deep, they kind of tutorialize it a little bit. There's the claws reaching out. That's also good. That gets you the idea of it as a dangerous monster. But Kaduku's just there. And it's really cool to see stuff like that. The last time I saw that was people's reaction to Brutus. When they made Brutus not where he was previously, and people were caught off guard. I wasn't really caught off guard because I forgot why. I think it was that Chris had spoiled something about that in the trailer, and I was like,
yeah, he did.
Yeah.
We're in the thing. But if you didn't watch, not everyone watches all the content. It's that thing that I told you. Always assume no one's seen anything.
Yep. And so I knew it was coming, and I was like, there's something to keep an eye out for. My reaction was, oh, that's awesome. It was still that's awesome, even though I was expecting it. Nowadays, it's just, oh, there's Brutus.
Okay, I'll tell you the type of person I was. Man, I can't Zerg this thing without having claws back. This is a bullshit. That's the type of player that I am.
Yeah.
What was the story again?
Yeah.
Doesn't care about story. Zerg's boss is somewhat me at this point. Sorry.
So story and me are mixed. In a lot of games, I want to like the story, but then I find it is delivered in such a way that I just can't digest it. And this is most MMOs. Most MMOs start out, you're the hero, you save the world. Next expansion, you're the hero, you save the world again. Third expansion, you're the hero, you save the world from the stronger thing. And I don't know if you're familiar with the anime Dragon Ball.
Kind of.
So you know how they're constantly escalating power?
I can't watch. Okay. Yes, I am familiar with it. Dude, I can't watch that stuff. I can't. It's like perpetual blue ball stuff. And I don't understand why people like it. I'll be real here. You know what I mean?
Real. I don't
I'm
like
charging up for half an hour commercial.
Right. That is how I feel MMO stories are. I think we're on the same page here. Because I dislike Dragon Ball for the same reason I dislike MMO stories.
Okay.
It's, we're going to defeat, the super bad evil guy, and then nothing happens. Or it's a mini boss. It's like, you have defeated his 15th minion. Beware, the 14th will be stronger. Yeah. It's like, I don't care. I cared more about the Path of Exile story because of the way the Envoy storytelling worked for the introduction of the Maven than I did about most MMO stories.
Interesting. Yeah,
The power
the POE, I do not play POE for the story.
Mhm.
I
I
know
don't either.
kind of what the story is, but I have no. I kind of know. I kind of
Yeah.
know. But when you were summarizing it earlier on, and you're like, and you're on the beach, and I'm like, wow, he must really like lore in video games. And I'm like, I probably shouldn't spoil that. I don't care about that aspect at all.
It's funny because if you watch me play a lot of games, including PoE, usually I will look like the side of person that just doesn't care. Who's like,
Okay.
lore? Who needs it? I've got stats.
Yeah.
But when it's really well done, those are the games that make me stop and pay attention to the dialogue because it's interesting and it engages me. Borderlands 2, Handsome Jack. Never before had I cared so much about a villain in a video game as Handsome Jack because he was hilarious. He's going around and he's like, "Oh yeah, I have a unicorn made of diamonds. It reminds me of you, so I called it Shithead." And it's like, what? What? What do you mean? It was great.
I'm trying to think the last time I cared about the story of the game. I cannot think of a game where I cared about the story. It's been quite a while. It's been quite a while.
I mean, and then Borderlands 3, the villains are two wannabe streamers, and I'm just like, no, please no. Stop. This is what everyone thinks streamers are, and I hate it because it is so inaccurate. Still haven't.
Were they all multimillionaires?
Yeah, and all obsessed with the views and doing stuff for it. And it's like, shout out to all my fans. And I watched someone play a bit of a game. I even got it for free on Epic, and I just haven't played it. And every time I'm just like, no.
Someone basically made the game, and their entire thing was it's based on what they think all streamers are like, or what?
I don't know what the intent was.
Okay.
But the result. And then there's the game, another game that I saw Subtractem play recently called Neon White. Indie game, kind of speedrunner's paradise, where they take all the cringy anime tropes and they just lean into them. Like, that kind of hurt to listen to, but also I'm giggling because they are clearly very aware of how cringe everything is, and they're just going with it. And there's something fun about that. There's something where you have extremely talented voice actors who are saying the worst cringe lines in the most charismatic voice you will ever hear.
Have you ever seen, what's the name of the game? Oh, the one that's the pickup artist guy. And you have to select the scenarios. What is the name of that one? There you go. Now that's a story I could be invested in. No, I'm just kidding. But that was pretty cringe as well.
It was, and that was something that it was fun to watch someone play through, not because you actually found the game itself fun, but because just it was presented seriously. I still don't know. It was either a horrible serious game or brilliant satire.
It was brilliant satire. Sorry, I just spoiled that for you.
It's fun.
I found it. South Park, the South Park game.
Oh, that was not the one I was thinking of.
That's probably the last. That's the last time. No. That's not the one that. No. You were right on the game about the pickup person. I'm saying I found a game that actually cared about a story. Sorry, I jumped around a bit there.
Fair.
The Stick of Truth was the last time I cared about a story in the game.
Yeah, it's just finding storytelling that resonates with you.
It was just so out there and just like had to pay attention, and then now there's zombie Nazi things. Like what the heck's going on? There's so much of that I remembered it, and then and the interactions from all the show and stuff. So I think that was the last time that I was like, what is this? And actually was paying attention. But that was a game that you were supposed to, like, that was the game. You're kind of watching almost like a video story thing that's interactive, and you're missing the jokes if you're not paying attention.
Yep. And some games do very well on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think MMOs, the best storytelling I've seen in MMOs is things like the Envoy and Path of Exile or Vinderi. I bet you remember at least one of Vinderi's lines.
Oh,
Really? None? How about one of the other heist rogues?
I don't remember any of them. I don't play Heist very often.
Okay, I guess if you don't play Heist at all,
I haven't in a while. If I heard them,
Yeah.
it'd probably make me chuckle again. Okay,
right?
So I knew them at the time. I'm sure I knew them all. Same with the Einar. Probably was one that I like. You know what I mean?
Yep. In MMOs, I think that is the best storytelling because it's not a grander narrative. It's just a really funny line that makes sense with the character. And you can hear that a dozen times and it's still funny. Now, maybe if you hear it 500 times, it's a little less funny. But unless you're doing it all day, every day.
I don't know. I still like Einar's. We'll be best friends, Beast, until we slaughter you. That one always makes
me. Don't you have Nets Exile?
Yeah. And then they put that meme in there after that goes. So I'll give GGG that. They definitely know how to meme. So
yeah,
I'm glad that they embrace that. It did go some of the Blizzard route lately. What, you guys don't have phones?
Like, that's you guys think that there's a difference between buying gems and buying items?
So, yeah.
Yeah,
it can't take a joke. You know what I mean? You know, I've often been in situations in life where you could laugh or you could cry, and I like to laugh. So that's how to describe it. So,
and I'm sure it's not easy to take a joke when it's a lot of people who are really mad at you. At the same time, every time I look at how big companies like EA recently, where they had a dumb tweet and they discussed internally, according to leaks later, turning it into a thing where they have a bunch of their internal studios roast them for the bad take. They didn't end up doing that. They ended up just doing I guess we'll take the loss here. And tried to turn it around. Just apologize. Just say, I'm sorry, this joke went too far and didn't land. Just say it outright. Don't try to spin it into some, haha, gotcha, or haha, cool moment. No, just apologize. And
guys, this is terrible advice. Never, ever, ever apologize. Double, triple, quadruple down. Never show weakness.
If you are a company, I think the best thing you can do is honestly and earnestly apologize.
Maybe. I think there's a giant debate on that. Because sometimes bad publicity is good publicity too.
Sometimes it is.
Yeah, exactly. So outrage, all of a sudden you double down, you get in all those headlines, and then people forget what they are mad about or not mad about, and then just remember your name. Is how it plays out. Like, oh, Blizzard, that one company that I heard of before. Buy games, yeah.
Everyone knows their name. At the same time, from reports I've heard, it's not helping them. Their revenue might be similar, but their user base is dwindling and dwindling. People are actually leaving. Now, maybe they have internal metrics. Maybe they only care about the revenue numbers.
Yeah,
but
I don't know. Well, sometimes, I mean, it's just like content creation. It's like everything in general. Like none of it is set completely in stone of what the best strategy is, and there's multiple conflicting strategies. Like in economics, for one instance, you could have a business that sells thousands of widgets in bulk at a very small margin, or you could sell one for mega profit. Right, the luxury versus mass volume sort of thing. So sometimes you just make some wrong decisions there. And everyone's different in the decision that's right for them. Do you always nail it? No.
Yeah. And I also think that there's value in not just apologizing for something when you truly believe in that thing. Like, I've never apologized for saying that I think Harvest is bad for Path of Exile. I still believe that Harvest is bad for Path of Exile. There's a good chance there's going to be angry hate comments on this video because I have said that. And I fully still stand behind that. There have been other things that I've thought about POE where I've changed my mind over time. I've reassessed and I've said, yeah, at the time it made sense. Now, I don't think I feel the same. Either I've changed as a content creator, I've changed as a player, or the game itself has changed and things that made sense before. I used to say, you should always have at least 6K life on your builds. If you don't want to die often and you want it to feel good, have 6K life. Then 315 and 316 happened. And now I say, your life number doesn't matter. All of your defensive layers and synergies matter. If you don't want to die a lot, you still need those. You still need defenses to address the different things you're running into. But I've had builds that have 4 or 5K life that feel totally fine.
I don't disagree with that. The life thing, that's basically somewhere around that. Close to 6K is what I used to play. But now, like, for instance, my Lightning Strike character has permanent Fortify, is like, I think 5K life and 600 energy shield. And it's crazy, crazy tanky.
Ghost Dance or Divine Shield?
Huh?
Ghost Dance or Divine Shield?
Yeah, that's Ghost Dance with a ton of evasion, because it's the doing the whole champion stuffs with perseverance, of course. So I get full energy shield back 3-4 times when I do get hit, and my evasion's so ridiculously high that doesn't happen.
Yep, and I'm guessing that build's biggest weakness is going to be poison, and so you need.
I have 77 chaos res and good regen and life gain on hit, so that's fine as well.
Yep, which only leaves Fizzdot, which is everything's biggest weakness because there's just almost no defense in the game against it.
Yeah, so bleed, immune, corrupted blood. So I mean, it's only, but it still can't fully tank all the, and it has 100% spell suppression. And I still almost portaled out on Uber Cirrus. So I didn't think I could hate the Cirrus fight more, but you know, the Uber one, no, is a bunch of. I made some really bad mistakes, but man, do I hate that fight in every way, shape, or form. I'll stand by that one.
I don't mind it personally. I can see why people hate it. I just don't find it too bad. I used to hate it because you used to be able to get a bug where the stairs would trap you in the meteor maze. And unless you could tank it, I specifically remember in that league designing a character where if I hit my molten shell, I could tank a meteor because I was so sick and tired of dying to being trapped in the stairs with the meteor maze.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's still a lot of things. Getting lasered off screen when you run back, or the storm being right at the gate and you open the door, just instant. There's so many just little stupid things. But one of my problem is I have a lot of problems with the red on black, like seeing the trailer. Even I know what to look for, and I still have very, very hard time keeping track of where he's going and seeing what he's doing with that.
That is the most common complaint I've heard, and I think it is a very well-deserved complaint. A lot of boss fights in Path of Exile, and to be honest, in a lot of video games broadly, are made to be aesthetic. And a lot of the boss fights in Path of Exile do that very well. Cirrus, let's just pretend for a second that you're not the person playing the fight. It looks great. The themes of the fight, if you never had to play it, all work really well with the character, with, you know, the background and everything. And then you go to play it and you go, but it's black and red on black and red. Delirium is, I have a gray screen. There's some things in there that are dangerous, but the entire screen's the same color and I don't know which one's which. I'm not sure if a solution is for Cirrus. And, oh, Toxic. I remember being really annoyed at Toxic early on in Archnemesis because I was playing a bow build. I had a Mirage Archer. And I could not see the Toxic in the Mirage Archer. In the clutter, as everything is exploding, I'd lose track of a little ball. Then it would just plop, plop, plop right on me because it just blended in. And I didn't see that
Okay.
little glow
Hold
animation.
on, pause. Yeah, so toxic is the one when you kill them and does the balls that are going to be the
Yes.
green above you, and then drops and it basically does an
Yes.
absurd amount of damage and kills you if you don't have Chasmos, right?
Yes.
I don't. Okay, so I still don't know what all the archnemesis do. I basically built my. I built my character to not even care anymore on every single one of my characters, basically. So I don't even know which one's which. So you said toxic, and I was like, wait, what is he talking about?
It's a green
then
one.
you said the ball that drops on your head and goes blah, blah, blah. And then that's like, oh yeah, the green, the poison.
Yeah.
The blah, when you said the blah.
And so that's something where I'm sure they could add an outline of a contrasting color. Video games need more of that because things should be clear to see. Fights are much more enjoyable. Uber Elder is a great example of this. It's a gray background. Arguably, I never had any trouble with it. I could see if someone had trouble with some of Elder's ice spikes. The tentacle slams, super obvious. Shaper beam, super obvious. Shaper balls, super obvious. Expanding ring, super obvious. Most of the mechanics on that fight are incredibly crystal clear.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I have to say, World of Warcraft generally had very good boss design and very good visibility. There were a few cases where it was a problem. But I remember playing Rift, the WoW killer by Treon. And I remember some of those bosses, the mechanics weren't bad, but the visibility was so much worse. They went with the red circle on the ground thing for a lot of their mechanics. I actually like mechanics that aren't just a red circle on the ground. I know that Final Fantasy XIV has a lot of the underground telegraphs too. I think Final Fantasy XIV did a much better job of it. But I would still prefer, if given the choice, things where something within the fight acts as a tell. Maybe the floor glows, but it's part of a pattern of the floor. It's not a red circle drawn on the floor. Because as you're naturally using immersive elements, subconsciously it becomes easier to understand. And I think that's actually why the Maven's design is a little bit weaker, because despite the floor being segmented into 3 sections, with the isometric camera view and with the angle, you don't really get to look at it that way. You very often, because you're rarely standing dead center, you only see 2 sections. And it makes the fight a lot harder. It reminds me of some of the fights in Dark Souls, where I couldn't tell the enemy's reach or their weapon range. And I got hit time after time because there's a little bit of a fire or glow effect on it. If I can just see the enemy's sword, really easy to tell, and I can dodge it. But then you add a fire effect and all of a sudden there's a trail and it looks cool. But I can't quite see where they're hitting me. And I get hit more, and it is a more frustrating experience because I don't actually understand the range as well. And I do it over and over again, and then finally I get it down, and I finally beat Abyss Watchers.
Did you said you played Lost Ark a little bit, right?
Yes.
Did you make it to the end with like the raid bosses and all that, the daily stuff that you had to do?
Yes.
Okay. I had also had a lot of problems with those fights, understanding what was going on in them. So I was wondering if you did as well, or am I just getting old and I just can't follow games anymore?
So it depended on the fight. I remember the Phantom Legion dungeon and Phantom Legion raid being very annoying. I remember
I'm talking about specifically the like Guardian bosses.
Oh, okay. So that stuff was a step beyond the Guardian bosses. The first Guardian boss that I found to be super hard to follow was the Fox boss. Before that, I had a pretty good idea, if not what the thing was doing, of at least what I should do in reaction to its animations. I did that because for the early ones, I went in solo. And I tried to solo it.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I failed at soloing it, I did succeed with a couple, but after I failed at soloing it, that was when I would try and do it with a group and down it. If I had just gone in with a group the first time, it was a lot harder to follow. I can definitely see that. I probably would have struggled as well.
Yeah,
Is the Fox
I
boss?
went in like with groups for all the stuff, and then you don't know what's hitting and what, and I don't know. I didn't know what other people's skills even look like too, right? So
Yeah.
it's all sorts of clutter and charge ups and stuff here and this that. It's like, oh wait, is that like a player doing that or the boss or what? I don't know. I
Yeah.
found it very
And
confusing.
that was the second boss that I had done without trying to solo it first. The first was the Scorpion, because I tried the Turtle and I was nowhere near the timer. So I was like, okay, my gear is not scaling well enough for this. For the Scorpion, I went in with a group. I didn't understand what was going on at one point and I died to something. I don't think I would have died to it again. But then it was downed and then I got enough gear to go onto the Fox boss. So I don't think I needed to ever fight that again. Fox boss, I went in, it went badly. I still can't tell you why, because that was right around when my friends were quitting the game. And I maybe played for a week after that. And then I started to get busy with league start stuff. And I was like, I had fun with it. I enjoyed playing with people. I don't really have any desire to go back and find a group to play with. I would rather play with a group of people that I already know if I'm going to play Lost Ark.
Yeah. Oh, that brings up a good thing to talk about. So you have a lot of friends probably that play games, right?
Yes.
Do they play Path of Exile?
Some do, some don't.
Okay. And this is a little bit why I even started the YouTube thing and started building a community too, because I still wanted to play. And most of the other people that I moved on, I mean, it requires quite a bit of a commitment, right, to learn. So I'm 36. A lot of my friends have kids or something. They're not going to have the time to play Path of Exile. And then my other friends that were younger grew up and had to get a job and stuff. So they didn't have time either. And like I said before, I got a lot of vacation, so I'd just take off and like play a ton during work for that like first week, and then I just play like in the evenings or something. But I had way more flexible schedule. So I'm wondering, do you always play solo, or do you play with friends at all? Do you level at all, or is it like always a solo experience?
Always solo, yes.
Okay. Do you think if it had a good group experience that you would get more of your friends to play?
That's a hard one, because a lot of my friends who don't play are people who I don't think ever would. Maybe a couple would play if there was a good group experience. But most, there are other people who don't game that much. Or there are people who, for example, they play Destiny 2. Or they play World of Warcraft still, where they're not really into the action RPG stuff. They've maybe played Diablo 3 a bit. For them, it was I beat the story, and that's it. And so I don't think very many more would. I can think of a couple people who definitely just don't play that used to because they didn't enjoy the group experience.
Yeah.
For vast majority, I think it's just not the game for them, and that's totally fine. They play a lot of games that aren't for me. I mean, even when I mentioned Destiny 2, I tried it when it came out. I didn't particularly enjoy a lot of the aspects. Maybe someday I'll go back and try it, but I don't think it's ever going to really grab me the same way Path of Exile did.
Because even like Diablo 3, I think is a much better experience for like casual people. So, I mean, one thing that I think is, we talked earlier about target audiences and that they might not, they want more of a hardcore audience that plays a lot of it. And it really seems like that is their target demographic. But it's very hard for me to introduce friends to Path of Exile like ever.
I just show them the skill tree. They either recoil in horror or they go, that's awesome, I want to play.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a huge time commitment though to get to even the end game for a lot of people.
Yeah, at the same time, I have a friend who, real life friend, plays games somewhat casually, mostly plays very different things, stuff like Overwatch. I did that thing with a skill tree. He was like, that's awesome. And he plays casually for a Path of Exile player. He got to Maps his first league. And he's gotten to Maps every league since. And most of the things that you'll hear as new player complaints, he has had no issues with. He's had other issues They're entirely different issues, because very often what I see with that is things that are brought up as new player complaints are a casual player who wants to return to the game, not someone completely new to Path of Exile with no baseline. That your
Yeah.
experience on the game is built off of a baseline. And I think Chris talked about this on a Bakecast, where PoE 2 is a reset of that baseline.
Yeah.
People are expecting a different experience, but that there's a lot of things, and even in some of the new player complaints that you hear, or new player complaints, there are issues that the game had at one time that it doesn't have now. Like Watchstone grinds, it takes too long to get to tier 16 maps. That's not a thing anymore. Now your progress is gated much more by your build than by your ability to progress through the maps themselves. You can, just on maps alone, if you, let's say in standard, you didn't get map completion, it would be an hour or less to get all the way up to tier 16 maps. Even if you had to get all the maps as drops. Okay, maybe that's a little low if you have to get them as drops. Say 2-3 hours to get to tier 16s, but you have your fully juiced build.
Oh, on a fully juiced build. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
Gotta
saying
roll stuff just in trying to buy for the currency to roll any maps is gonna take you at least 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah.
If you don't have
I'm just saying,
yeah.
Build stuff aside, what takes people time now is scaling their build to deal with the content.
Yeah.
And so that issue of, well, I had a build that was capable, but I couldn't get to the content, is now gone. It doesn't mean that, oh, well, red maps are easy, everyone should be doing it. Should only take an hour. No, scaling your build is still somewhat difficult. There's still challenge there, and there's still knowledge there. But if your issue was not those things, if you were already comfortable with all of that, and it was just the mandatory Watchstone grind, that's essentially been completely eliminated now.
Yeah. I've had this conversation on a couple of the interviews about the whole baseline thing. That I forgot who even brought it up now. I've done too many of these. Just kidding. It's not possible to do too many of these. I'm doing infinite amount of them because they're fun. But now they're starting to blur together, so I don't remember who brought it up. But
that'll happen.
But the question is like the Roas. To me, like the Roas killing you or whatever. I hated the Roa change. You're a new player, like, you know, you don't know how it was before. You're just like, oh, those are really scary, and they kill you. Well, whatever.
Exactly.
And then you'll either get really frustrated and quit, or you'll keep playing. And it's just a thing that happens in the game where we're like, well, that wasn't what it was before, and now this is, and that's a bad change, or like the different.
It's been interesting, certain leagues that people have had a lot of complaints about changes because of how I play and because of a style of build I play. I was very often completely insulated from them. I like builds that have enough defenses that I'm not going to be dying constantly. And I like very high quality of life builds. So when archnemesis came in, I didn't notice a severe jump in difficulty. In 3.15, I noticed some of the aspects, but not others. Because when people were using very gimmicky flask setups, that hurt them a lot more in 3.15.
Mm-hmm.
I tended to have pretty conservative flask setups. I wasn't, relying on the flask for my build's power. I was using it on top of.
Or using all unique flasks or something.
Yeah. And so the unique flask nerfs, it's like, well, one flask's down. Okay. One flask isn't as good. If you had 4 or 5 of them, yeah, it's a huge nerf to you.
Yeah, actually the archnemesis thing, I definitely felt that it was harder, but I got really lucky in the same regard because I did the Shattering Steel Champion. And so I had permanent fortify. I was super tanky already. I had the adrenaline all the time. And I was playing a fizz build that you just get fizz % pen and then you don't really care about a lot of the new mods. So
it's also
it didn't even slow me down actually, like getting to maps for what my prep was. But it was like I had no idea going in that it was going to be like that. I just kind of got lucky.
Magic packs were the thing that caught me off guard because I was used to magic packs being free EXP. They were actually really dangerous at like level 8 now. But leveling in the future, I'm not going to make that mistake. I'm not going to look at a magic pack and go, "Oh, it's level 8. It's free XP." I'm going to go, "That could kill me." I'm going to respect it. I'm going to kill it for EXP, but I'm going to respect it. And I also got lucky with Mana Siphoner. A lot of people panic and run away from it. I always made sure that I either treated it with a lot of respect and stayed far away, or I ran right into melee range, even before I knew that it was a donut, because I just run into melee range, or one of them had run into melee range of me, and I noticed I wasn't taking damage. I didn't know if it was a bug or not, but I was like, all right, well, here I'm safe. If it never gets in contact, if it's over there, I'm also safe. I'll just do those two things. And a lot of people panic. I think this is something that casual players especially struggle with. The more games you play, the more you have a sense of what to expect. And at least for me, knowing that it's a game and knowing that you can try again. There are stakes, but it's not like you're going, "Oh God, what if my character's deleted?" I mean, if you're on hardcore, obviously. But aside of that, a better feeling of, I can sit back, I can look at what went wrong here without panicking and blindly reacting, because I know when I panic and blindly react to stuff, it's going to go worse and I'm going to die. And I have experience in Hades, Path of Exile, World of Warcraft, you name it. When I panic, I die and it doesn't go well. With a new player, maybe they've played 100 hours of video games in their entire life. They're like, "Oh God, the boss is huge and scary and I don't know what to do." And it's a perfectly natural human response. It's one that game devs often exploit to punish mistakes. And so being able to calmly and analytically approach the situation is kind of like a superpower in gaming that lets you play on hard mode a lot easier, or lets you, if we go beyond that, because another topic, but hard mode in general is a bad thing in games, or lets you play in a manner that is challenging by using customized difficulty. And customized difficulty is something that Path of Exile does an amazing job at, because there's so many variables that you can tweak and slide, and you're rewarded for every step you add in ways that just a simple normal, easy, hard could not ever do.
Yeah. Watching new people play games that don't normally play games is such a weird experience. Have you ever watched any of the channels where like brand new people like actually never played games?
So there was a series by, I think it was the YouTuber Rasputin, where he got his wife to play games. She was a non-gamer. And that was a really interesting one. I liked it a lot more than just watching someone who has never played games play a game, because there's a lot of stuff that doesn't get talked about or understood. So you, on one hand, you have the gameplay and the perspective of his wife who doesn't know games. Then you have the perspective from him who plays and, more importantly, analyzes games for a living. And it was just a really nice balance to see both perspectives at once. I want to see more of that.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Like um I think it's the Mario thing. You like hold down and you can do like power jumps and stuff like that. I forgot what even it is. Somehow most people just figured it out and then it was very intuitive. And then you watch a new person play, they have no idea that that's a thing.
Yeah,
Right?
because games use shared language.
Yeah, for sure.
It's why some people have so much trouble with Path of Exile, because they expect the shared language to be Path of Exile Diablo. It's not. There's very little shared language between the two games. It's Path of Exile, Magic of the Gathering. If you played Magic of the Gathering for 10 years, you'll have a very good understanding of how and why a lot of things in Path of Exile work the way they do. But if you've played Diablo for 10 years, you'll just be wondering, what is this? Because they're not actually related mechanically, they're related superficially.
I played Magic. I've never heard that comparison of the two. So I wonder if I just took that for granted. Sometimes, do you ever notice some things and you realize that, okay, well, you have a warped perspective on it, or you took whatever for granted? I think you probably have this experience as well from the content creation. Nothing, you might think, okay, that's intuitive. Overall, I think everyone thinks that there's this thing called common sense. That's like the shared thing. But I don't believe in that concept. I think there's a concept called perceived common sense. But there's actually no such thing as common sense. Each person has their own experiences, which shapes what they expect in whatever situation. And then we tend to always think that everyone has the same background as us and just thinks the same things as us. Did you notice that at all?
Yeah, and the thing that I always come back to time and time again as something that I took for granted. I took it for granted playing Path of Exile, and I took it for granted playing World of Warcraft, is being able to analyze a situation and being able to look at it not from a perspective of this sucks, the game is stupid, but even if the game is stupid and even if it does suck, what can I do differently to prevent that from happening? It is a mandatory skill to be a top player in anything. And for a long time, because I was that top player, and a lot of my friends, a majority of my friends were also those top players, be it in Path of Exile or World of Warcraft or even RuneScape. I took for granted that I was always doing that and that not everyone else does. It wasn't until I started making content that I started to see how many people don't do that because they've never had to.
Mm-hmm. I think I've always looked at it like that, but I grew up playing Warcraft and Starcraft and stuff, and a lot of 1v1 things.
Yeah.
And I think chess is another thing. I played a lot of chess. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like there are things that you could do and you clearly did something wrong. So I've always had that mindset of like, what can I do better as well? But yeah, there's that. And then there's also the other concept of like it's a spatial awareness thing or a timing awareness. Like so many people in World of Warcraft had problems remembering what the boss is going to do next. And it's literally a sequence that repeats itself. He does 4 moves and he does this one and then slightly different. He does this move next and then he does this one and then this one. And it would surprise them almost every time. And I have no idea why. That's a different thing than what you're talking about.
It's a different thing, but also related. And
yeah.
If you look at boss design, I think it's why I find a lot of games so easy these days, because I've noticed a lot of games use a 3-move pattern for their bosses. And older games used 4, 5, or even 6-move patterns. Those are harder to remember. And part of it is people just aren't used to thinking that way. If every game they play, they probably never noticed the fact that every boss they fought had only 3 moves. But subconsciously, it got ingrained in them that bosses have 3 moves. One of those silent, understood rules. And so when they play a game where the boss has 4, 5, 6, all of a sudden, they're caught off guard. And another good example of this is Path of Exile does its bosses differently than a lot of other games. That a lot of what is dangerous in a Path of Exile boss, the cue to tell you is the boss saying a voice line. It is the boss says a voice line, and then something scary appears on your screen, but it is probably too late to dodge if you're dodging based solely on the visual. If you dodge when you hear the voice line or when you see it in the chat, you're able to avoid things much more easily, and you have much more leeway for mistakes. Older games do this. Games that are 10, 20 years old do this. Modern games have gone with red circles, I think because red circles are easier. And there are games like Final Fantasy XIV that use their red circles very well. There are other games where they use their red circles very poorly because you're introduced to them early on, but they don't really mean anything because the early game is so easy that you can't die. Or maybe you can, but you have to go out of your way. You have to really go out of your way to die. So you're introduced to, oh, some moves have circles. Then you're introduced to, circles don't mean much. Then you're introduced to, yeah, but also there's now 8 circles and each of them one-shots you. Good luck. And all of a sudden you have a really poor preparation that there's a lot of consistency in terms of Path of Exile with some mechanics. There's also wild inconsistency with others that should be corrected, but slams, no matter what is doing it, a slam in PoE is all the same. They're all really long animations. Like Phoenix's explosion is a slam, Shaper slam, the most iconic slam. And they are almost all going to kill you unless you outgive a fight to the point where it is trivial. You know that it is a slam move when it is super slow and it kills you. And so it's easier to avoid them all because the concept is consistent across multiple bosses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I back to the WoW thing, man. People would go into the fight, and I swear it would be the first time they ever seen the fight.
Oh yeah,
like you said, there's 5 moves. They'd act shocked that there's 5. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I didn't see it in my guild because
okay, you were like probably in a top one. I was in
top 30 US.
Right? No, like yeah, going to any of the pug things. It's just like, you stand here, then you stand here based on the positioning, then you stand here. These are safe spots to maximize your damage. That's how I look at the game. And they're just like, oh no, he did an ability. I gotta move around. Oh, hey, you forgot to heal completely. Oh crap.
Yeah. See, I was usually the person
also you got hit.
saying you stand here and you stand here and you stand here. Here are the safe spots.
Yeah.
And then I'd be like, and why did you die for the 5th time to that? I've explained it every time. At this point, I don't know. Or the stereotype is probably a thing for a reason, but I swear most of them were then just like BRB smoking another bowl. It's like, oh, so you're just not paying attention at all. Got it. Because that's not everyone, but it is the people who said that in chat. That's what I will say about that.
They're just embarrassed, man. They're just making up excuses. It wasn't. They're just embarrassed that it happened 5 times in a row. They're making excuses.
I think the worst was when I'd get asked to help friends guilds. That was always the worst because it was going to be a miserable experience for someone. It was either going to be miserable for me because they just weren't going to make progress all night because they weren't going to try to improve, or it's going to be miserable for them because I'd give what would be just a normal thing to say. Like someone would say, oh, I had up all my defenses and I died anyway. And I'd look and be like, your shield wall was last used 6 minutes ago. It was not active when you died. Use your shield wall for that mechanic. And then they'd feel like they were personally attacked when I said that. It's like, what? You check the logs to call me out? How dare you? Well, yeah, because if I just let it stand, I don't actually know if A, you thought you hit it and you didn't. The button just didn't go off. Or B, you completely forgot about a defensive there and you're making an excuse. Or C, you didn't actually know it was off cooldown and you need to be reminded. But I'm going to say something because otherwise you're going to die at that exact same point to that exact same mechanic unless I hand of sack you. Because you're not going to necessarily be aware of it. Or you are aware of it and you won't die to that again, but you want to hide that from the rest of a raid. And I have no way to know, so I am assuming ignorance and not malice.
Interesting.
Also,
I will never raid with you in the game.
I just realized what time it is.
Oh so yeah, it is.
Probably best
I didn't look at the thing. Yeah, we need.
Yes,
we've been talking for 3 hours. Huh? Doesn't feel like it.
It doesn't feel like it. It's been fun. But...
Yeah, I hope you had fun. I had fun.
Yes, I have had fun.
I thought we were at like an hour. Oops. All right. Anything you want to plug?
Well, the thing that I would most like to plug is actually my second channel, 10 Gaming Thoughts, because I feel like it is important as a content creator who does things for Path of Exile to have a broader perspective. And while I've played a lot of games in the past, I want to keep playing new games and experiencing new things. There are aspects of roguelites that I have found that have improved my perspective on Path of Exile. There have been mistakes made by developers of games like Wolcen and New World that have improved my perspective on Path of Exile and have better allowed me to see both what the developer GGG does and why they do it, and also allowed me better to see why players do things or what they want, or alternate solutions. If I'd never played RuneScape, I wouldn't have nearly as many good ideas on how to improve Path of Exile's trade. So if you play Path of Exile and you also want to see those sorts of other things, then my second channel, 10 Gaming Thoughts, is where to find it.
Cool, cool. You know, I feel bad now. We didn't talk about your grand plan for content creation. We didn't talk about that other channel that you did and what you did on there, any of that stuff. But I guess I'll have to have you back on,
I
if
guess,
I do things
yeah, I'll have to.
or something. But yeah, check out his second channel where he talks about other games and such. And yeah, thanks for coming on. So,
Yep, thanks for having me on.
all right, bye guys. See you in the next one.